Alrighty.
I'm live now officially. Okay. Welcome everybody. I'm talking to E Penner, or I don't know
It's
what
just
you.
it's just it's just M Penner now. I got rid of the E.
Let's
I
just go.
killed the E.
We'll call you Penner. You can call me
Just call
Swan.
me Penner. Yeah.
You can call me Swan. That works fine. We're gonna be talking about liberalism and traditionalism, and then our second topic will be Penner talking about Ukraine as someone that's more on the inside of things. So I know no one's watching, but if you're watching this later, there we go. Over to you, Penner.
Okay, yeah, so this is my favorite Twitter frenemy, Liquid Swan. Yeah, we're gonna talk about, like you said, we're gonna talk about traditionalism and liberalism. He's taken the traditionalist position. I'm taking the liberal position. Okay, let me go over my notes.
Yep.
So this is what I have you written down on your positions.
Okay.
So
I'll clarify them if you need.
yeah, okay. So okay. Your first position was that tradition is a cultural infrastructure which guides people through the present and into the future. It coincides with associated structures, which also underlay it. Is that correct?
Oh, I'll. Do you mind if I reframe?
Yeah, you can
Okay.
reframe. Go
So I
ahead.
basically see it as like all the cultural and, well, mostly cultural, so like stories and stuff in the past that act as like a map for you to guide yourself into the future. Though it's constantly updated, but the updates are very slow. But yeah, basically what you said plus that.
Gotcha. Okay, hold on. Do you know how to get to? Fuck, how do I get Discord and the call in full screen? Do you know how to do that? Okay. Or no?
I'm
Sorry.
not I'm not sure. I only ever have my basic image up there when I'm doing chats because to make it simple.
Okay. Hold on. Okay, no, it's good. It's good. I got it figured out anyway. Okay. All right. Never mind that. Sorry. Could you go over that again? I was distracted.
Okay,
My bad.
so yeah, no worries. So basically, you have the past, right? And
Yep.
that informs your present because obviously, if you're still alive, that means your ancestor did something correct. So then you look to your past ancestors and you kind of copy or interpret what they did and apply it to the present and move forward into the future.
Okay. Yeah. That maps to what you were saying there. Okay. Now the next position you had was on liberalism, and it was um liberalism is anti-traditional. It does not guide as it has no oughts, but only why nots. It creates a throwaway society with interchangeable people units and is specifically destructive towards tradition.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, that's one of my points. Yep.
Okay, cool. So just wanted to make sure that was your position still. If
Yes.
you want to give like a little opening of your position other than what we just went over, that would be cool too.
Okay. So there's a couple things. First of all, I did a stream not too long ago, or a couple months ago, with the British Knight, one of his streams, and we talked about like where did liberalism go wrong,
Yeah.
and that sort of got me on this ball of uh, how, because this whole thing that I came up with this idea about traditionalism being destroyed by liberalism, or liberalism specifically sailing around the world, killing traditional societies. Um,
Yeah.
that sort of came from this line of thinking during that stream, and so I just started thinking about it, and I wrote some stuff down. Nothing big, but I'm definitely interested in hearing a critique of it. I want it to be. I want my opinion to be destroyed,
Okay. Well,
basically. So so I'm
prepare for it to be
prepared. I'm
destroyed.
prepared, but I will push back if I don't agree. I'm gonna tell you why.
Oh yeah. No, don't worry. I'm sure we'll disagree on plenty of stuff. Okay.
Yeah,
Don't worry about it.
yeah.
Okay. So yeah. Okay. So you're good. That was your thing.
Oh, I don't know how deep you want me to go into that specifically,
Oh
but
no, no, that's good. Okay. Cool. So I'm just gonna go over to here. Okay. So the first question I had was, how does tradition interact with material reality? So let's say a traditional society worships a volcano as a god. the volcano explodes and the people have to either flee or die. Should their tradition evolve or stay the same because they've left their volcano?
Well, there you asked a should question rather than an what's the moral should
Oh,
there.
hold on. Sorry, I'm not. I am not getting your audio.
Oh, okay. Check one
Um,
two. Check one two.
it's got something to do with my OBS. Give me a sec.
Yeah, I've had these problems before. So hopefully he will fix that. I think he's probably just resetting.
I think it's the OBS on my end. Hold on.
Yeah, I think so. Mine's picking up fine. You have to like check your open volume mixer. Let's see.
Okay, I think I'm getting you now.
Can you hear me now?
Say something loud.
Can you hear me now? Open volume mixer. Check levels. So I am speaking. I don't know if you can hear what I'm saying, but
No, I can't hear you. I'm just making sure that I can that everyone else can hear you too. Let
okay.
me
Oh, you
pull
can.
up my
Okay, cool.
stream. Oh yeah, I can hear you. The stream that people watching can't hear you.
Oh, good. Okay, well, that sucks. I think we're both being picked up on my stream anyways, so yeah. If it works out. I do a lot of streaming with what do you call it? D&D with my little group.
Hmm.
But I do have this problem where my sound gets like doubled up. I wonder if that's better. Can you hear me? Okay, good. Yeah, you should have in your volume. Can you open up your volume mixer? So if you go to your toolbar, and then there'll be like a little speaker thing. Right click it, then it's click open volume mixer, and it should show. Uh, it's on my toolbar. So I just uh, you know where I even know the taskbar. Sorry, so the taskbar it has like the date and time or whatever. Just near that, there should be like a little speaker, and you just click that or right click that, then hit open volume mixer, and then it should show all the things that are possibly making sound. Like you have system sound, speakers, OBS 64 probably, or Streamlabs. This is your first time streaming live? Is this your first live stream on your end? Oh yeah, that makes sense. I've had this problem before. Let's go. I believe we're talking about. You said something about a volcano. Yeah. Well, not in totality. You have to update the system, but yeah, basically. Well, what do you mean like evolve? Well, that's again that comes down to a question of should, right? I don't know what's best for them in particular. That well, for example, maybe they worship the volcano god and it was mad at them. Maybe they think, and that's why they left the land. So that doesn't really change that they're worshiping the volcano. They could change their god or whatever, but I don't know if that's really um that'd be I don't know if that would be really applicable to this discussion. No worries. I'm open. I'm just trying to think. I'm trying to really think hard how it apply. Well, generally, I understand what you're saying. Generally speaking, like there's because we can look at the salmon thing and then we can look at the deer thing as like separate sort of modes, right? But now you have to think now the mode for this tribe now is actually transition between one lifestyle to another. So now their tradition, what will happen is it'll have to take that into account, like the failings of the lost land or whatever, for example, or and maybe part of the tradition will be about that and how to avoid the failing. So it's again that's it's hard to say. Is that a that seems to be like a system update in a sense. It's not necessarily like they have to get rid of the salmon. They could incorporate new things as well as still having the salmon thing involved. So when does like how does when a society well societies also change over time. So you could say like yeah. Okay. Yeah. Uh, yeah. Well, at that time too, under the founding fathers, there were slaves, right, at the time, and so I mean, that wasn't very liberal in a lot of ways. Um, one of many, or one of a couple, but probably the biggest. Well, with so when you think let's think about what liberalism is. Um, it's we often frame it as like a peaceful force, correct? Like something that brings stability and peacefulness and freedom and liberty to people. That's how I've like been propagandized since I was young, anyways. Yep, no problem. Yeah. hold on. I just gotta check. For some reason, your audio is not getting picked up right now. I'll fix it. Just be a sec here. All right, go ahead.
Check, check, check.
Yeah, we're
Mic
good.
check.
We're good.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so what was I saying? Okay, so the purpose of liberalism is to create a society where it's safe enough for people to be able to pursue their own desires based on their religion, culture, philosophy, etc., so long as they do not impose that onto others. And that does require violence in a sense, in that you have to maintain a state. I'm not like liberalism can't exist in sort of an ANCAP state because then people will just impose their will on others. So there needs to be a government with like rules and regulations to restrict it, and then that government creates a space where people can have their liberty.
So this is like a
Um,
theoretical liberalism, right?
well, there's no such thing as perfect liberalism. But I think we've done a pretty good job in the West in general. It's never perfect, but
Well, it's
that's
it,
that's
it's interesting about the putting your will on others, for example. Like, uh, when has that not happened under liberalism? Like when they first, like for example, the French Revolution, where when I'm not going to say it started there, but that's a good example
hmm.
of let's say it coming to be in the midst of, like, I guess, the end of feudalism. Um, what that wasn't very peaceful, let's say.
Well,
uh,
I think there is a disconnect necessarily between the ideology and the implementation. Um, and basically the way I see it is that liberalism is working if it's successful in the sense that the goal for me anyway, because I'm a pragmatist, is when you're creating this freedom for people to pursue their own desires based on whatever they want. When you're creating that freedom, what you're doing is you're creating a space in society where people will want to go there. This is why America has been the center of immigration, because of the freedom it allows. It attracts people who are intelligent, who have high motivation, and then those people are given the space to go out and make something of themselves. And so that is what has created the tremendous economic and technological success of the United States, is because and the West in general, is because it's created that space. So
mhm.
I'm tremendously disinterested in like freedom as a an idealistic thing. I think it works purely from a pragmatic standpoint.
Okay, so the first example I gave was like the French Revolution. We both
Yeah,
probably agree that's pretty violent,
I would say that
chaotic.
was not a super great implementation of liberalism.
Okay, and then you had colonialism, right?
Correct.
And that was basically the destruction of foreign traditional societies. Not necessarily wholly, but somewhat. Like there's some sort of irreparable damage that happened to First Nations people in Canada, United States, even in Asia, definitely Africa, but that's besides the point. So, uh, what? How can we say it's like bringing people freedom when we're actually kind of mowing down everything that
Well,
is?
it gives people who are inside the system freedom.
Okay,
Those were people outside of the system, clearly.
so it has to. So liberalism cannot exist in a it can't exist with competing systems. It has to seek them out and destroy them, essentially.
Well, it has to dominate them like any other system. That's why you see like the U.S. Political hegemony, and that's sort of one of the reasons, sort of underlying the conflict with Russia right now. Obviously, there is going to be conflicts between world systems of doing things, like the Cold War, which was like a war between communism and liberal democracy. So yeah, definitely. I mean, there is an aspect where liberalism does not necessarily tolerate competing systems, and it sort of drowns them out. Yeah, that definitely happens.
We see.
Every single system does that. Like that's the nature of power, right? That's not something you can avoid.
Well, here we can even make a note of this. So, like the right now the liberalism is conflicting with Russia,
Yeah,
China,
yeah,
um, but it's not conflicting with the, and those are the two of the biggest blocks, obviously. And then
yeah.
it's semi conflicted with India, but it's kind of keeping India neutral in a sense.
Well, yeah, India's sort of trying to be a democracy, but they're still kind of weird. They're
It's a
not quite there
crazy
yet.
it's a crazy democracy, man. It's like 1.5 billion people, and it takes 7 days to complete a election. It's nuts over there.
Well, yeah,
Uh,
India is like the weird thing about India is it was never originally like supposed to be a united nation until Britain sort of tromped in there. Was like, yeah, you're all one nation now. Oh, really? Wow, shit.
yeah. Well,
I didn't.
India's probably like as diverse as Europe, and so is
Oh
China.
yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. Yeah.
so it's kind of crazy. But we did. Let's say United States Empire, if you want to call it that, they don't have much conflict with the European Union.
Well, no, obviously because our interests align. Geopolitically, we have very similar ideologies. Our cultures are very similar. So yeah, we have a lot in common. So yeah, we like the thing with liberalism is, and the reason why I think it's better in terms of a moral sense than other systems is it is much more cooperative when it can. So it will destroy you if you won't cooperate with it. It's done that plenty of times throughout history. But it more often prefers to work and works better through like coercive means. So like you look at the reason why there's a war in Ukraine right now is because Russia and the West were competing with each other for like a sphere of influence over Ukraine,
Mm-hmm.
and because the West is so much more like the GDP in terms of like wealth and stuff, yeah, it's not even close. Russia is declining, has been for a while now. And like if you look at NATO's military budget, it's bigger than Russia's entire GDP, which should tell you all you need to know about the economics of the situation. So Ukraine, Russia could never keep Ukraine under their influence based on economics. That's just why they had to resort to military power. And so, yeah, liberalism can afford to do things like influence through economics instead of influencing through military power, which is why I think it's a force for good overall. Because if it can, because war is generally bad for the economy, except for weapons manufacturers, they will try to do things through economic coercion rather than direct force.
So you'd say that liberalism makes your wallet fat in a sense, like so to speak.
Absolutely, yes. You can look at the wealth of liberal countries, and you can look at the wealth of the rest of the world, and it's not even close.
So I have a quote I wrote down here a while back. Liberalism makes your wallet fat and your belly full, but your culture dead, raped, and spiritually zombified, or worse.
Yeah,
Liberalism is fake and gay.
I figured you would say something like that. So I did prepare for this.
Okay.
Hold on, let me find.
Oh wait, let me get back to the traditionalism. Just but make your note, then let me get back to it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So make your note quickly, then I'll say something.
Okay, no, go ahead, say it.
Okay, so what traditionalism is it makes what traditional societies do that are successful is they take what's good, and then they make it the will of God, or they make it the God, essentially, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think without that, without I think that's why liberalism sort of leans towards almost the destruction of faith. Without that, I don't think you can have like a functional society. And the thing is, it's sort of a intergenerational gap that'll happen, and once it's lost, it's very difficult or painful to get back. Uh, and that's where you
Well,
get things like the collapse of Rome, for example.
well, I have an agreement with you, and then I have a couple disagreements. So I
Okay.
would agree that our modern liberalism is very lacking in terms of religious principles. And I don't know if we necessarily need to return to Christianity or if we can try and create something sort of new. Um, but basically, religion does play an important role in giving people purpose. And if you look at the main sort of crisis in the West culturally is a lack of meaning or purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why you see people, turn brands into their identities, fandom worship, that kind of stuff. It's mimicking that
Yeah.
primal urge to believe in something. So I don't know if that's it might be a good replacement. And maybe that's how we replace it is with like TV shows and pop culture and that kind of stuff. Maybe that's what we do. I don't know if that's going to work. Personally, I think that there is definitely a place for religion. If you look at liberalism in the past, religion and liberalism worked hand in hand. And if you look at liberal principles, they were sort of born out of Christianity. So I think there's definitely a partnership that we could try and revive out of that, and I think that's a valuable thing to try and do. But what I will push back on is I don't think that necessarily just because a society is more traditional, they are going to be happier or well off. For instance, if you look at rates of suicide, they are always higher, way higher, in more traditional rural societies and areas than they are in urban cities. And the main reason for that is lower population density, alcoholism, depression, especially if you're like in a northern area. And so, yeah, a lot of more traditional societies will have higher rates of suicide.
But they also, and I don't know if that's true or not across the board. But despite that, what you have is definitely higher rates of birth,
Well,
much higher rates.
would you say that Russia is a more traditional society than the U.S.?
I think Russia is a society that is struggling to find itself. So I don't know if it's more traditional or not.
Well,
They
they're
definitely took a big damage during that communism era.
yeah, well,
So
their demographics are collapsing. So the thing with birth rates is, it seems that basically any developed economy, their birth rates drop by quite a bit there's a number of reasons.
what would you say the
But
main one?
um, I honestly can't tell. Whenever people get rich and educated, they tend to have less kids, but they tend to put more effort into raising those kids. I think it's I haven't studied the subject extensively,
Well,
but
I have
it's not.
I have three kids. If I had the money, I'd have like 15.
I know you would, and that is based as hell. Don't get me wrong. Um, but there's like a trend whenever countries get more wealthy and more economically successful and less impoverished, people tend to have less kids. And I have heard that one of the reasons for that is like when you're poor, you have a lot of kids for a couple of reasons. If you are like a subsistence farmer, you
Security.
need them to take care of you. You need them to take care of your farm. You need them as manual labor almost. So kids are like I think that's it. It's in a more primitive society, less economically developed. Kids are like a resource. You feed them, and then they grow up and they take care of you and they do your work for you and shit.
Yep, yep.
But
I agree.
in a more developed economy, then you have to do things like you have to school them, you have to educate them, you have to take care of them while you're working a job. So
Well,
basically, naturally, as your responsibilities increase, you're going to have less kids, but you're going to put more resources into developing the kids you do have.
but here's the issue with that though. It just you know how Canada's demographics are.
Yeah.
There's a lot of boomers retiring, and they didn't have enough kids to sort of keep up the let's say retirement funds and all that stuff that they have. Uh,
Well, that's why we have immigration, my dude.
but that's a whole other problem in both directions. But with not when you don't have enough. So here's the thing. Basically, how I could interpret what you're saying about how liberalism or how let's say developed economies have fewer children is that as you have a more developed economy, you take less responsibility for making sure you're taken care of when you're retired.
Yeah, that is the thing. Is with developed economies, there is a move away from sort of communities taking care of each other and more of a move towards obviously like the state taking care of you. So instead of your kids taking care of you, you've got a pension fund.
Yeah.
Instead of your church taking care of your medical bill, all of a sudden you have social medicine. So yeah, there's like we are creating we're creating government systems to like mimic sort of the traditional way people took care of each other
Which
on a larger scale.
which we can tell right away, right? Compared to the traditional model, is unsustainable. Now
Yeah.
there is the argument of immigration. My wife's an immigrant.
Yeah.
However, that creates a whole bunch of other problems.
But no, I agree. So it's like this is the thing is like liberalism creates success, and then success creates problems, and then to fix those problems, you have to invite more problems. But the fact is that this is just sort of the price you pay for all the great things you love about liberalism, which is like, not having an economy that sucks shit, being able to afford, good education for your kids and a good future and having nice houses and nice things like that's the price we pay. And we're not. I can understand the perspective that we're inviting more problems onto ourselves. And we definitely are. And, we're going to have to, like, don't get me wrong, when it comes to immigration, that's a problem that we absolutely have to solve. We can't stop it, but I think there's ways we can mitigate the problems created. First of all, don't do what Sweden did and just let, like, 200,000 unverified people across your border.
Hey,
That's a bad idea. You have to be selective.
yeah. Well, have you ever read Decline of the West by Oswald Spengler?
I have not. I've heard of it though.
Okay, well, he mentions in it this law put in by not who's the first emperor, like the first real emperor of Rome,
Yeah.
uh, not Octavian.
Yeah.
What was his name though? Augustus. Yeah, so Augustus, he put in this law called Lex Julia de Maritandis Ordinibus, which basically means forced marriage. They had by a certain age you had to be married. And if your husband or whatever died in war, then or died, you had to get married within 2 years, and there's all these rules, right?
And that was to replace their like birth rates,
As to
probably,
help
right?
fix their birth rates, especially among the elites, because they just weren't having kids. Actually, one of the
Right.
interesting stories about Augustus is he struggled so hard to make it so he had like a blood heir, right?
Mm.
And then he ended up having to give it to his stepson. Can't remember who came after him. It's been a while since I read up on Roman history. Anyway, so his stepson, I think Tiberius, he has to take over. And the crazy thing about that is, and it's a huge old story. Like he had grandkids, granddaughters, and then like daughters, and they're trying to he was trying to breed someone to take over for him, and ended up just dying and giving it to his stepson. But this law that he made to keep the population up was more hated than or despised than like the loss of entire armies. Like the entire
Mm.
legion would be wiped out by like some German tribe or whatever, and they didn't care about that as much as they cared about this like mandatory marriage law.
Right.
And
Yeah. That makes sense.
slowly what happened over time is so you had this big city Rome, and you had big cities around the empire, obviously, and they became like, or they were like the cultural capitals of those areas. And so as these cities would stop producing people, uh, would move in from the provincial towns, and all the best and brightest from the provincial towns and move into the cities, and then they catch the same disease that everyone else had, not actual disease, but the cultural disease, and they too
Yeah.
would stop having kids. And eventually, what happens is all the sort of talent is taken away from the countryside, and ideally, you'd expect, say, that even the smaller villages would then fill the provincial towns, and you'd have a talent pool still coming up. But what happened was that the society degraded. All their best minds stopped having kids, and then within a couple centuries, Rome was done. It took a long time for it to fall because it was so high up. There was actually kind of like two or three falls, and then recoveries in the Roman Empire. But uh,
Yeah. The term "the fall of the Roman Empire" is a bit of a misnomer. It was more of a very slow,
stumble,
gradual decline.
couple
Yeah.
stumbles, and then a total wipeout. Uh,
Yeah.
but
And then they split in half, and then they fought for a bit. And
yeah, the Germans came in. But the
um.
interesting thing about that though is
Yeah.
that basically, if the immigration solution would work, that should have worked for Rome too. Um,
Well, the thing is, I don't know if it's entirely like equivalent systems. It's like a very, very different time, different levels of technology, and I don't think Rome ever totally like. 'Cause the thing is, they had their surrounding countryside, and then as far as immigration for the West goes, we have basically the fucking entire world. Like the
oh yeah,
West is a vampire. We suck up people from everywhere. We drain all their brains, and we take them to us because it's way better living here.
but
Um,
what my argument is for that is that it's not that it won't have the same problem. I think it's just going to be faster. Like the collapse is going to be faster because of this, and not just here. But imagine what's happening to India when you lose all their best brains.
well, yeah, I don't know. I have not seen. The thing is, I haven't seen any decline in like our capacity to do science. Like we seem to be advancing. We're not stagnating scientifically. Like we have the most advanced technology we've ever had. Our computers are crazy good. We have rockets that can like fly, and then the same rocket can land.
Yes,
So we're
yes.
on the
But
like we're
can you build a rocket?
well, no, because I don't need to. I have my own job.
I can't either. And
Well, no,
I don't know anyone that can. And for a long
but
time we hadn't really gone back to space. Like I mean, we had, but we hadn't gone to the moon or anything, and it was kind of like a hopeless situation until we had this like special person that came around with some good ideas, and you know, uh, my God, he's landing rockets on barges in the middle of the ocean.
well, that is the thing. That's the advantage of liberalism is it allows, and I think maybe one of the reasons the Roman Empire fell is because I don't think they were a perfect example of liberalism in comparison to like America. But yeah, like a person like Elon Musk could
Well, no,
never.
sorry, I don't think Rome is liberal. I was just giving an
Yeah,
example of a
well, yeah, no.
civilization.
Uh,
Sorry.
gotcha. But they were sort of the the precursor to liberalism, I would say. Greece was actually originally, but we our roots, Western roots, came from Greece and Rome. I'm sure you'd agree.
I wouldn't. I'd say like what came from Rome. Like I'd say the religious aspect. I kind of consider the two major characters for the West to be Socrates, so he was Greek, and then Christ, and then
Yeah.
Rome inherited the Christ part. So yeah, I look at like a lot of our stuff's German, like a lot of our law is German and Anglo. So it's I don't know. But go on.
Well,
Sorry.
the Anglo law came from Roman law. I think Roman law is what Roman law is what made England as good as it was, and that came from Rome.
No,
Um,
they had their whole well when Rome was there in the Roman areas they had the Roman law, but when they left they just went back to the the Anglo Saxons came, they had like a different sort of system. Um,
yeah, but I believe that the law that even England has now is based on Roman law. It's like it's developed, but the English common law is the source was Roman law, I believe.
I think it was from the Normans really changed a lot of stuff. So yeah, it's hard to I don't know. I'd have to
But yeah,
that's
I
like a
don't know.
big
I
subject.
would have to. That's what I've been told by people I've argued with about it. So yeah, I'd have to check up on it myself. But anyway, the argument I was about to make about our modern liberalism is that like you look at someone like Elon Musk. I don't think someone like Elon Musk is possible in any system other than liberalism. He would not have been allowed to thrive. He would have been choked out. And so, we were stagnating a bit when it came to space technology. And then all of a sudden, along comes Elon Musk, and he sort of, I'm sure we would have figured it out eventually, but he definitely expedites the process. Um, so, yeah, I mean, I understand what you said about the decline of Rome. And, it is alarming that we are having kids below replacement rate. And I think if I was in power, I would be doing things to encourage people to have kids. Like a good start would be to like pay like stay-at-home moms. You like give them money to take care of their kids because they are
Yeah.
performing like a vital service to society. They're not. It's kind of criminal that they're not getting paid for it, to be honest.
Well, the thing is
And
that the only problem with that is then you're sort of making motherhood an employee of the state. So
well,
there's some problem with that I think, but I see where you're coming from. The
yeah,
problem
the solutions are all imperfect. That's the problem. But
well,
we do have to figure out a way to like
it's not
incentivize
that
people.
it's not that though. I've looked at like a lot of the history around this, and there's never been an occasion in human history where we've been in this situation or similar, and we've been able to regain the population rates.
Well, the thing is though, we are transitioning, hopefully sooner rather than later, to a type of economy that will not need as much labor. Like in terms of automation, like so many jobs are being lost with automation. So yeah, I agree that it seems like we're sort of headed towards the cliff, and we have to sort of trust that automation will be there to catch us.
Well, that's the
Um,
thing. I don't think that's well. It's hard to say. Like, I think automation is actually I think it's gonna be the opposite. I think it's gonna increase the amount of jobs. Um, like for
oh,
example, McDonald's in near my place, they have all these kiosk things that you can like select your meal. Like you order it yourself with the touch screen,
yeah.
and everyone's like, oh man, they're going to be laying off everybody. They can't find enough employees now because it's so efficient. That touchscreen has become so efficient and people like it better because they can customize stuff. They actually have more business now and they don't have enough employees to cook the food fast enough, which
Well,
which blew my mind.
I think the lack of employees has more to do with like the weird the COVID. There was like a lack of employment in employees during COVID
There is definitely
in
a lack of
general.
employees.
But
Yeah.
like that is the future of restaurants is going to be like there will be no workers in the restaurant. It will all be done by machines. They already have prototypes for that. So yeah, there's going to be
Well, they're expensive though. Like that's the problem with them.
well that's the thing though is though if there is a shortage of workers, you have to pay the workers more. So at some point, it's going to be worth it to use the machines because the cost of labor will be so high.
Oh, sure, sure,
Um,
but then at the same time, that there'll be shortages of labor down the line of production. So there'll be shortage of labor to produce these machines, unless you can automate that too.
Well, that's the thing is like when it comes to producing machines, it's pretty easy to get machines to produce other machines, and then obviously you have to have someone make the machines to produce the other machines. But it feels like we are moving more towards like very specialized um, labor as opposed to like general unspecialized stuff, like working at McDonald's. So obviously you need like a high education to be someone who makes robots, to make robots. But yeah, it feels like that's sort of what we're going to shift to, and that's also going to require like in terms of efficiency. Their average worker's efficiency as because of technology and a whole bunch of other stuff has increased by like 300% or whatever. So yeah, I mean there is obviously the danger that well we're headed off a cliff, a demographic cliff. Is automation going to be there to catch us? Well, we're just going to have to hope that it is. Looks like it might be because we really don't have another choice. I suppose we could just smash all the machines, but I don't realistically see that happening. People like their iPhones too much.
I, I, I don't know if it's gonna come down to a smash all the machines, but there's just gonna be no one there to use them, and they're just gonna be a big pile of garbage that we're gonna dig
Well,
up in a
the
thousand years.
the end game is we'll all be living in the pods, so
Oh fuck! I'm never going on the pod ever.
you have to drink your corn syrup.
Come and get your corn syrup. Was that the meme with the UN soldiers and the
Yeah, I hate the
I hate
Antichrist.
the
I hate the
Antichrist.
Anti. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. That's a good one. Um,
So the one thing I did want to sort of challenge you on is I think because I know you're a postmodern perennial traditionalist. What a
perennial.
yeah perennial traditionalist. What a mouthful. Um,
I don't think I put perennial. I don't know if that. What do you mean?
oh, I think that's in your Twitter. No, I thought it was postmodern perennial traditionalist. Maybe it's just postmodern
Yeah, I think it's
traditionalist.
just postmodern traditional. Maybe I did something weird one day or
Okay,
something. That
yeah, I'm aware that perennialism is a bit different. So you're not a perennialist?
I'm not even sure what that means.
Oh,
Dude,
okay.
what is it again? What is this?
Um, Perennialist is basically you look back through. It's the belief that there's like a underlying metaphysical structure that all tradition comes from. There's like a metaphysics, and that if you look back at
Oh,
traditional societies, they are all coming out of like this metaphysical truth that's more true than reality.
well, I kind of like. I'm more of a Joseph Campbell, Hero with a Thousand Faces sort of guy. I don't know if that makes me a perennialist, but um,
I think that is. Think that's. I think Campbell might have been a perennial or like a proto perennialist. I'm not sure. I'm not super read up on that.
okay. Well,
But anyway,
I got this interesting story though. I could tell you that I always blows my mind, or it blew my mind when I first read it. It was from a Joseph Campbell book. Now that we're on that topic,
yeah, sure. Go ahead.
just let me take a side road here. So, you know the Aborigines in Australia.
Yeah.
So they're one of the oldest human societies, at least before the white man came and ruined it all. They were one of the. I'm not saying they ruined it all. I'm just making a joke. But when they before that point, they were one of the oldest and most isolated human societies that still existed, and they had all these traditions that were really old, that were probably common around the world at some point, like circumcision, for example. It's
Yeah.
common in desert countries where there's not a lot of places to wash. So they take what's good, make it God, then they make it a ceremony, right? Um,
Gotcha.
or what's helpful, what's useful. Anyway, so that was one of their things. Most of the tribes did something like that, and they used a flint knife. And there's a ceremony with like the great snake was coming to take your foreskin because he could smell it or whatever. And the kid would get all scared, and he'd run off to the females, like the aunties, and the
Oh
grandmas
no.
and stuff, and they'd protect him with spears and tell the men to f off. And then eventually they would relent, and the men would take him off, take him away, and then they would kind of hold him down, but not because um, they were holding him down like violently. They were holding him down so like when they're doing the cutting, he doesn't like hurt himself, right? They're kind of
Gotcha.
holding him still because obviously it's painful. And if he doesn't
Yeah.
scream, then he gets praised for it, and it becomes like he's now becoming a man. Um,
Gotcha.
but then so for most tribes did that, and then there's some tribes that Joseph Campbell figured were the most ancient, and they did this other thing where they did subcision, which is where
Yeah, they split it in half or something, right? I think I've read about that.
they slice the well. There's different ways to do it, but
Oh boy,
the
this stream's not getting monetized.
mine are never. So they slice under the underside of the penis and they into the urethra,
Yeah.
and so what it was it's obviously painful, and they use a flint knife, and what would happen is it would create this sort of fleshy wound, and they'd have to pee out of that. They wouldn't pee out of their front of their penis anymore, unless they clamped it down or whatever.
Ugh.
So they could reproduce, obviously, because you come out of the same hole. Um, so anyways, it would create this like fleshy wound, and it'd take a while to heal. They put herbs on it or whatever, I guess, and it would heal up. And by the time it was healed, it looked sort of uh, like a vagina, I guess, or a vulva. And they called it the male womb. And what it was, and that's where you became a full human, full man, because you integrated your feminine with the masculine.
Yeah,
And
I remember reading about this.
oh, you did, okay.
Yeah,
That
it's,
blew
it's
my
it's all
mind.
coming back to me now. Yeah, it's not something you forget. So how
But
does this connect exactly? So I'm a bit lost.
well, you know the Adam and Eve story.
Yeah,
Eve comes from Adam's rib, and thus woman is created. Correct.
yeah,
Well, this is it's a similar theme, and marriage in the I guess Judaism and Christianity and others was to create the whole person by uniting the man and the woman. And it was just interesting how the Aborigines did that in a different way, like where they didn't necessarily have marriage. They kind of had marriage, but it wasn't like here. Um, but it was still the basic premise was uniting the masculine with the feminine, sort of like the Tao, you know, with
right.
the white, a little bit of white with the black, and a little bit of black with the white.
Yeah, so I am. I see what you're getting at in terms of like the metaphysics. So I'm sympathetic to sort of the view that tradition comes from metaphysics. But I see it more like tradition and culture in general is like a social evolution. It's like social programming we developed in response to our environment. Um,
Well, that's the liberal
and
view.
well, that yeah, that's my view. And basically, I believe there is some sort of metaphysical. There's some sort of metaphysical principles underlying the laws of reality. Like there's something, but it's like it's not separate. There's no separation between the material and the immaterial. The immaterial sort of might inform the material, but ultimately, basically, your culture will always be a response to your material environment. Like you said with the circumcision thing, they developed that because most likely they were in a desert.
Well,
They didn't
yeah,
have
it's like
access to water, and so
yeah,
they
yeah.
couldn't clean out their dicks. And I assume that would lead to like infection quite often. And so probably early humans were like, oh, we're living in this desert. Our dicks keep falling off because they get rotten. So they developed this circumcision thing, and that's how you see it like develop independently.
Well, just to be
And
clear, that is from a liberal frame that I put that out there. That's from a very liberal view.
okay, I would curious to hear the metaphysical principle for slicing someone's dick open.
Well, I mean that's a liberal assumption. I'm not saying it's because I don't know what the reality
Well,
is
the
exactly why they
tradition
did it.
the tradition would have to come from metaphysics, right? If it doesn't come from material reality, it would be
Well,
metaphysical, right?
well, it depends. Like for example, what do we when we talk about the metaphysics? Like what how would we often talk about like God, right? Like the central creative principle.
But yeah, whatever your source, it has to comes from some sort of source that's not material reality. Whatever it's outside of material reality. Whatever the source of the dick slitting was.
Well, that's a weird thing too. Is like I have a sort of like analogy, a metaphor maybe that I could explain it. Do you mind if I go into it?
Here, go ahead.
Okay. So imagine you're on top of the Giza. You're a speck of dust on top of the Giza pyramid, the biggest one,
Yeah,
and you look how far you can see because it's the tallest structure. Okay, let's say it was the tallest structure before the Eiffel Tower. So let's say it was before that was built. So you're at this speck of dust on top of this Giza pyramid. You're looking across and you're like, wow, look how far I can see. Right? I'm
yeah,
so I'm so high. Right? Compared to everything else, I'm above everything else that's knowable at that time, I suppose. Now you can I say like the liberal maybe not liberal the progressive looks he's at that speck of dust and he looks forward and he's like, I'm the greatest that's ever been, right?
yeah.
And maybe there's more better ahead of me, but for now I'm the greatest that's ever been. Look how far I can see. But he's not looking down at all, which is like this huge pyramid that he's sitting on top of. Now that pyramid is a combination of all the infrastructure of your built by your ancestors. Like when you're born, you're not born into the woods. You're born into a house or a hospital even now, and you have parents, or maybe you don't, but most people have parents, and they had parents, and so on and so forth, all the way back through time. And like for example, the roads and sidewalks you walk on, like I never built any of those, but I benefit from them, and that's the pyramid that lays below me.
Well, I've built a few. So
Oh,
I'm.
yeah, I've done building as
um,
well, but you know what I mean, like the metaphor, right?
yeah, no, I
Most
understand.
people like
But what I would say is that like our society, despite being liberal and degenerate, it is still fundamentally built on the past. Like we haven't, maybe people aren't aware of it, but everything still is like, liberalism came more or less from Christianity. Well, it came from Enlightenment values, which came from Christianity, mixed with like some Roman stuff. And Christianity came from Judaism, and you follow Judaism back, and you get to the dick splitting, right? So the tradition it follows all the way. But the thing is, tradition, like you said, tradition evolves. So the tradition has evolved, and the tradition is going to keep evolving. And that's like my gripe with sort of traditionalists is they're like, we need to return to this older tradition, but that tradition is not relevant. There's lessons we can learn from it. I definitely think there's valuable stuff we can learn from tradition. I'm not the person who's like, fuck it, throw it away. I think there's lessons we can learn from it, but I reject the notion that it's like just like a metaphysically better way of doing things. I think that tradition and culture is like the software we use. We put it into our hardware, our brains, as a society to figure out how to deal with certain situations. And if you try and input the software of like hunter gatherers into a Roman society, like a Bronze Age society, it wouldn't work. And so we can't take a Bronze Age or a medieval, cultural programming and insert that into like the modern world. It wouldn't work. It would just end in disaster and people, using different systems would outcompete us and destroy us.
well,
And ultimately, that's the law of the land is power, right?
I would argue that it's going to end in disaster regardless.
Well, I don't know how you can say that because like the West, the only way the West can lose at this point is if we self destruct. And you can look at political division and say like, well, the political division is worse than it's ever been. But we've been through worse. Like the U.S. was more divided during the Civil War. There was a Civil War. Liberalism survived that. There was
Oh, I'd
like
say
there
it's
was
the
significant like fascist and communist movements all throughout like the early 1900s up to like the 1940s. Um, like we've been through significant turmoil in the West in terms of civil instability, and we've always come out on top.
okay.
Um,
Let me think. So I think we both have a very different conception of like what let's say the peak of Western civilization. What year would you say that Western civilization peaked, if it has?
oh, we haven't peaked yet. We're
Okay.
still going strong.
So my conception is that it peaked in 1867.
For what reason?
Well, I chose that date specifically because I was looking at music, and what I started to realize was that music is, well, all music's derivative, obviously, um, but the great the it's not the last great composition, but one of the best compositions that I can think of is the Blue Danube,
Mm,
Der Blaue Danube. And that first premiered in, I guess, not they call it a theater, I guess, or opera house in
yeah.
1867. In 1867, um, I think in Vienna. But anyways, my point is, but since then, what has happened? I mean, there's always been conflict in Europe, like feudally, right? But there are always kind of small wars, other than the. Oh, sorry, go on.
So is what you're getting at is like the Europe culturally has declined since then. Like we haven't been able to create anything as great or as original as that. Like the common argument, like look at modern art, like our spiritual artistic integrity has declined. We can't make good art anymore.
Yeah, well, like what? He's not an ancestor of mine, but he's related to one of his relatives, like Hieronymus Bosch.
Yeah.
If you look at his paintings, he's got those um, three panel paintings. The one's called one of my favorites is the Garden of Earthly Delights, because you can just look at it for hours. There's just so much stuff going on in that picture or that painting, and I don't think that could be created today, even though it was almost like Salvador Dali back in like the 1500s.
Well, I have a pretty significant counterpoint to this, so get ready to have your whole worldview destroyed. All right.
Okay, just hold on. I'm waiting for it. So my point with music is, since that point, what has music been doing? Like, we don't have a lot of great compositions being made. There's no competitions. Everyone's playing the old songs essentially. It's like a boomer in his retirement home listening to rock and roll, you know. But that's our whole society now. And
Well, you know,
and who listens to classical music now other than like me?
well, you know, I enjoy neoclassical. So there definitely has been revivals. Like I would suggest Max Richter. He does really good neoclassical stuff. Very good songs. But anyway, yeah, it's like obviously I understand your point.
Yeah,
My main thing would be is like obviously no single art form or genre is going to last forever and going to keep making new bangers. Like you know, the age of the Western came and went. We're in the age of the Marvel superhero now. God fucking save us.
cringe.
Um, yeah, but in any case, like you know, the media and the culture does change, and you know, maybe at some point, you know, neoclassical stuff is getting pretty popular. There's some really good guys out there doing some, you know, stuff that I think is good. I'm no by no means a classical expert. I enjoy some classics. But what I would point you towards is you have you heard of a little game called Elden Ring?
I've heard of it. It's pretty
Okay,
popular.
so Elden Ring is the kind of work of art that could only be produced in a liberal modern society because it is made by Japanese developers, but it's heavily based on like Western culture and especially like Irish mythology and that kind of stuff. Um, and it's a masterpiece on so many levels in that it's written by like George R. R. Martin. So the backstory of the world was so the world building was written by him, and then the story was built on top of that by like the creator Hidetaka Miyazaki and his team in Japan, and they created a world that is probably not on par, but very close in terms of like scope and detail to like Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. And you know, from every aspect, the story, the characters, and the world, and it's a beautiful game. It looks like a painting. Every area is like immaculately detailed, and it's like it's got environmental storytelling where you can sort of look at the world and you can tell you know the story that happened there based on the world around you. And the gameplay is cool. It's just an excellent game, and it's like
Exceptional.
the best example I can think of a modern masterpiece. Now we're not making you know operas anymore, but if you look at Elden Ring, it has every boss has a shit ton of bosses, and some of the bosses have some of my favorite music ever. Like there is really good music being made and put into video games. There is really good art that's being put into the world. The people who created the world, they painted a canvas, and but it's a canvas you can explore. So there's this canvas that you can explore now, and you can enter, and you could get you know absorbed in that world. And this is the type of work of art that could only be created by a modern, liberal, technologically advanced society. This type of work of art could never exist otherwise. It just couldn't. It's like a new phenomenon.
Oh, for
So
sure,
I
yeah.
would very much disagree that we are entirely culturally dead. Now, granted, it's from Japan. Um,
And it's derived.
well, it's derived, but it's the thing is like all art is derived. So like it's based on a lot of things, but it also combines those in new and interesting ways. When I was playing it and investigating it, like reading the story and all that kind of stuff, I never thought it was like, oh, this is just derivative of Lord of the Rings or just derivative of that, because it takes bits and pieces and inspiration, but it combines them into a cohesive whole that's new. Like I actually, the reason why I had to delay the stream was because I was seeing The Northman.
Oh,
Have you
nice.
seen that?
I
Good.
I'm is it in theaters?
It is. Yeah.
I plan on seeing it. I just haven't seen it yet.
Okay, excellent movie, but it is based on, and as I was watching it, I was like, this seems a lot like a Hamlet, because it is. It's actually based on like the Norse legend that inspired Hamlet. So it's like a Norse precursor to Hamlet, and it's very good. 100% recommend. Like they do a very accurate, brutal, unapologetic job of like showing Norse culture. It's very like culturally, historically accurate, which
It's very interesting, you know, because I agree. From what I've heard about this movie, it's really good.
it is.
But if you look at what it derives from, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with derivation, but what I'm saying is, uh, the things that become culturally renowned
Yeah.
are derived from sort of, let's say, traditional sources. Even Lord of the Rings, that wasn't a creation straight. It was partially a creation of his his creativity itself, but also his knowledge of the, like, say, Icelandic sagas and
Right.
such, right?
Well, what I would say is like there's no such thing as pure creativity. Everything is derivative to some extent.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
And like the sagas were based in part on real stories. And so I don't know. I wouldn't say that we have gotten, necessarily less creative. In the West, I would say because sort of progressives have cornered the market on entertainment because conservatives have sort of ceded that field. I would agree that a lot of it there has been a lot of stagnation and a lot of just like absolute shit. But there has always been in culture. There's been periods of stagnation. I was listening. I listened to a fascinating video about a. It was about a Greek novel because the Greeks did have like sort of a writing culture where they would write books and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And this guy wrote a book that was a parody, a sarcastic sort of parody of the current genres that were being done. And the main thing that was in the cultural vogue at the time was to create, obviously because inspired by the Odyssey, was to create these stories about how you would, you the author, it's autobiographical, went on this great adventure across the land, and so basically clones of Homer's Odyssey is what was in vogue in Greek literature at the time. And so this guy created the first sci-fi novel um, back in like the fucking I don't know 600s, whatever the year was back then. But he created the first sci-fi novel where he goes on this fantastic adventure, flying his ship up into outer space. He lands on the moon. He talks to the moon people. He goes to Mars. He's involved with like alien wars on multiple worlds. Like it's like the precursor to Star Wars essentially. But it's written in this way because it is a deliberately a parody of like the stagnant Greek culture at the time. Like the Greek culture was they're just making the same thing over and over again. So I would not disagree that currently we are having some stagnation problems culturally. But just because we're having a stagnation doesn't mean we can't have another renaissance. And I see plenty of there's a lesser amount. There's more shit being made than good. But culturally, there's still really cool stuff being made. So yeah, I'm not entirely pessimistic, and I'm like a writer as well. So I have my own stuff that I'm hoping to get out there, and I wouldn't say the work stuff I'm working on is stagnant at all. So
Well, that's good.
yeah, I
That's
don't.
good. What, are you writing fiction or?
Uh, yeah, fiction. I've got a. It's a big project. It's not going to be done for a while. But yeah, so I think it's important for people with and like just the YouTube sphere and like the new content generation environment seems very conducive for just the way technology is going. It's conducive for more people to get their work out there and for like there to be less barriers involved. There's more and more independent stuff going on. And say what you will about the streaming services, but they do create more opportunities for people to create stuff. And so you have to like trudge through the shit to find a gem, but there's lots of good stuff being made. So yeah, I'm optimistic about our cultural future, so to speak.
It is interesting though how like it took the Japanese to make the Elden Ring, and it wasn't done here.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that the problem is Western, especially video game development, is completely captured by like these progressive morons who just they don't understand the spirit of what makes games good, more or less.
I think they
Um,
misunderstand narrative like altogether, because you can tell if you listen to a narrative, you can kind of tell if it's useful to you or if it's true right off the
yeah.
bat. And they're like these progressive ones, they're sort of like, how do you explain it? Like you can like see the goal, you can like see the goal at the end already. Like they kind of
Well, I think the main, and I've been thinking about this for a while, but I think the main problem is like they let their ideology inform their work. So like everything is like you see this symptom over and over again in modern media, where they take something and they insert like a fucking bland as fuck woman protagonist, and now they're like person of color woman protagonists, and the character is so fucking boring.
Mary
I
Sue's.
watched, yeah, basically. Are you familiar with the Foundation series, the books?
I'm familiar. I haven't read them, but I
Yeah.
know about them.
Okay. So yeah, but it's written by like Isaac Asimov, who was one of the way ahead of his time when it came to science fiction. He was like one of the best. He was one of the first and one of the best science fiction writers. So it's like not only was he first, but he also did it way better than most people who came after him. So just like a giant. And then they recently did an adaptation of Foundation for Apple TV, and it's a long book series, so obviously they're going to do several seasons. But basically, what they did is they took the entire thing, they threw it in the garbage, and they're like, okay, now we're going to have two brown female protagonists who are perfect in every way. And I fucking hated it. It felt like genocide to me because it was my favorite book growing up, and it was like a fucking war crime. Okay,
It is a war
I'm
crime. I agree.
it is it's a crime against literature. Honest to God, if I could without consequences, I would do things to the people who made it in Minecraft. Um,
Uh,
it, it upset me to an unbearable degree, and I'm also very upset about the new Lord of the Rings. I think that's just fucking awful. Okay,
yeah.
and but the reason for it is you have these progressive bubbles in media creation because conservatives again they're like, go do fucking colleges for libcucks. Don't go to college. Don't get an arts degree, which based, but this is what it creates when you don't engage in a system. It gets taken over by your ideological opponents, and then you can't do shit.
Well, a lot of that's
Um,
managerialism, right? Like they captured the managerial infrastructure of different what do you call it,
Well, yeah, but
institutions.
the right didn't fight for it though. The right didn't fight for it. We've had this conception where going to get a film degree or media studies degree or whatever, it's like libtard. You're gonna get all this debt, and then meanwhile me, I'm gonna be based. I'm gonna be working in trades. I'm gonna not go into debt. And it's true. People in trades, they generally do make a decent amount of money and whatnot. But
Are you a carpenter?
I'm a construction. I do like hardscaping stuff.
Okay, I used to be a carpenter a couple years ago. Now I'm a different trade, but um, like I've you've probably built things, right? Like things that you use, like a
Yeah.
sawhorse or something.
Yeah, I haven't done a whole lot of that. Like, I don't do carpentry. I do mostly like patios, pathways, concrete pavers, retaining walls, that kind of stuff.
And did you have to get like whoever you were doing it for? Did they have to get like permits and stuff? I'm
Uh,
assuming.
oh, did I have to get
Well,
permits?
you might not have to, but I guess whoever run the job probably had to do them.
Um, I don't think so. It's like, well, obviously they have to get some permits from the city or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Probably the person owning the company. I've never had to get any like formal
Yeah,
training
not
though.
you personally, but yeah, it probably there's red tape and whatever involved in construction.
Oh, yeah, well, I like you have to get like a landscape architect to figure out what the landscape's going to look like. And that has you have to get university education for that. So
Yeah, so I've been thinking about that too for a long time, and um, I'm starting to think that all this stuff, a lot of it might just be make work projects in a sense. The officialization of everything. For example, like
mm,
my great great grandfather in Scotland like just built a house, right?
mm,
Him and his brothers or cousins or something like that got together. They built a house. They didn't have any. He became a railway engineer later, but um, he didn't have any education in terms of building, and he didn't need any permits or whatever where he lived. But he just built a house, and it's good enough. It wasn't perfect. But nowadays, like, and the house is cheap too. You just I
yeah.
think it cost him a couple $100 or something, maybe
But
$100.
that's definitely one of the reasons driving like housing prices go up. Is there's so much red tape; it's very expensive to make a house.
Yeah,
But I'm sympathetic to why it exists. Like there's some retard makes a house and then it collapses and kills 20 people, and then the insurance agency gets freaked out, and the insurance agency is like, I'm not going to insure any houses that aren't built up to this spec. So
yeah.
it's not something you can really solve. I think there's stuff at the government level you can do to hopefully make it not quite as bad, but there's going to be regulation in the modern world. That's just how it is. It sucks, but
Well,
what can you
what
fucking
I'm
do?
thinking is that regulation is sort of like a noose on your neck, and
Mhm.
someone's about to pull the lever, like for our society. Like where I'm living right now, it literally costs like $1 million for like a 4 bedroom house.
Oh, I know. I
Like
I know.
it's ridiculous.
Yeah,
uh,
well, there's definitely problems we're gonna have to find solutions for. I'm not under the just because I'm like pro liberalism,
well,
pro
I don't even
status quo.
know if I. It's hard to say if I blame that on liberalism or if I blame that on like I don't know. What's it? The 19th Amendment.
Okay, buddy. Look, okay. A little bit of sexism is okay. I will allow myself to be sexist. You can't be racist. Sexism is okay. It seems that,
Oh,
the progressives are tolerant of sexism. So that's
why can't we be racist?
okay. Look.
Well, I mean, like
Don't
I,
fly too close to the sun, Icarus.
I'm gonna fly just close enough. I'm not gonna say anything messed up here. But here's a couple of questions just to show how silly it is. If you have to choose between your own son and some random kid, like who do you prefer?
Oh well, I don't know if that has to do with race, but yeah, obviously, like for me personally, I want my kids to look like me too. So I'm not
Well, no, I don't mean
really
that in
into.
terms of looking. Just like as long as like
Obviously, yeah, there's familial ties
yeah.
are obviously
Okay.
important. Obviously, I say my own kid. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So cousin or some random person that you don't
Cousin.
know. Okay.
Well, I
Second,
don't know. I've got some dickhead cousins. Depends on the cousin.
or someone from your town or some other town.
Probably someone from my town.
Yeah, and you can keep going and going. Someone from Canada
Yeah.
versus someone in Algeria, right? Well, obviously you can choose someone
Oh
from
yeah.
Canada.
Well, I think I understand what you're getting at. Like there was the people were complaining like, "Oh my God, they're taking all these Ukrainian refugees, but they didn't want to take the Syrian refugees." It's like, well, yeah. First of all, they're our fucking neighbors. We live right next to them. Second of all, their culture is really similar to us. Like, third of all, we share the same religion. We same all this. Like, there's. They were saying it's racism, but it's like, no. It's obviously you're going to be more inclined to take in your refugees from your neighboring country who have way more in common with you than
Easily integratable.
well, yeah, exactly. There's less clash, less cultural clash. But anyway, I think we could because I do have unfortunately way too much stuff to say on Ukraine. Um, so if we could like wrap this up in the next 10 minutes, I think we've had a pretty good
Yeah, sure.
conversation
Yeah,
on
we'll
it,
wrap
and then we
up.
can move on.
Yeah, well, do you want to wrap this up for the whole tonight?
Well, I don't know. Do you have time to talk about the Ukraine stuff? We could do a second stream, or we could talk about it now. It'll probably take about 30 minutes, maybe.
I can let's see here. I can do either or. Well, we can reschedule. It doesn't matter. It's not. It'd be
No,
fun to.
I'm good. I did all the prep work today, so I don't want to fucking forget it, and then I'll have
Okay.
to like update whatever happens tomorrow as well.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Well, what were we were just okay. So basically, with my point with racism is that like, first of all, everyone's racist. It's just what we are. We're human beings because we prefer things that are more familiar.
Yeah,
So,
but that's not necessarily racism. It's
well, when someone says you're racist, they're just being a hypocrite because everyone is. It's all. It's
to
all.
some extent. To some extent,
So what?
I think
So what it's become is just like a moral cudgel. It's not really true. Or it's
Oh
true, but
yeah.
it's like, oh man, you suck because you breathe oxygen. You know?
Well, yeah. You the way the progressives have used it is definitely suck fucking dumb, just to say the least. Like they'll go and they'll say, but you can tell it's like you said, it's just a moral cudgel. It's like a weapon to beat people with, and it has no real actual fundamental truth to it.
Yeah.
Because they'll go and then they'll call you racist while they're being super racist, and then they'll say, you can't, I can't be racist to you because you're white, which is the definition of racism. So it's pretty clear when it comes to that stuff. They have no ideological footing to stand on whatsoever. Yeah, I would not disagree with on that. Like, trust me, I am by far the most conservative when it comes to like the progressive race politics stuff. I have a hard line there that I'm not willing to cross.
I yeah. Well, the interesting thing is, I see conservative. I don't mean that it is not to be insulting or anything, but I see conservatives as just sort of liberals that go the speed limit, or liberals that are afraid to go super fast.
Well, no, that is what I would call myself. The thing is, I think that there is like progress is important, but I think like you can steer the car the wrong way or you can drive off a cliff. So like there's certain points we shouldn't progress past, and then we dig in and we fight to the death there. Um, which I've got my places I'll fight to the death on. But there's other areas where you have to like give way, but you have to do it slowly. And progressives are stupid, and so they want everything all at once. And they're like, oh my god, why isn't all of society accepting to trans people, despite the fact that they only really started being a thing like fucking 5 years ago. It's
Yeah.
like, well, holy shit, fucking pump the brakes, dude. We
My
we got like fucking gay marriage like I don't know 5 6 years ago or something, and now we're
2005.
pushing like yeah, it's like I guess like 15 years ago or something. Yeah.
17. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, 17 years ago. And then we're moving at like breakneck speed, and just fucking pump the brakes a bit, chill out, don't fucking flip the fuck out, okay?
Oh,
And because what happens is when progressives do things too fast, then conservatives start going nuts and they start saying, everyone's a groomer and shit. And I'm like, okay, hold on. And
well,
that's when the stuff starts to fall apart.
Well, I wasn't so super concerned with it before. I thought it was more like a meme, but um, just recently, so my daughter's in kindergarten, my
Yeah.
youngest. I have two other kids. She's in kindergarten, and they have this app that you can use to they update her progress, I guess, in education.
Yep.
And so I went there, and it says they kept using the word they and them and their, like they didn't use she, and
Oh
she's
dear.
obviously a girl. So I asked them about this, and they said, "Oh, this is just the way things are going." And I was like, "Well, why? That's not the way things are going. That's not what I've heard, you know." But anyways, they're trying to force these politics on my 5-year-old. So anyways, they also canceled Mother's Day and Father's Day because
Oh
some
dear.
kids don't have mothers or fathers.
That's fucking dumb.
So my wife, so I have two kids from my first wife, um, but my wife's from Brazil, and she's
Mm.
never had a Mother's Day because she's always been the stepmother, right? She got stuff, but it wasn't the same.
Mm.
So she was expecting her first kid to, you know, to have a Mother's Day present. They always make Mother's Day presents, Father's Day presents, right? And
Oh
on
yeah.
her first Mother's Day from her first kid in school, she's not going to get
Oh
anything.
my god.
And I'm
Oh
just
Jesus.
like, uh, yeah. Anyways, I gave so first of all, I gave a bunch of shit to the teacher about like this pronoun thing because I was like, first of all, my daughter first language is Portuguese, so she's a little bit confused about the pronouns anyways because like she mixes
Gendered
up,
language. Yeah.
yeah, she mixes up he and him all the time and stuff like that, or her and she mixes those up. So I'm like, well, she already has this problem, and now you're going to confuse her even more by doing this, and like, what's your goal here, right? Anyways, I got them to. They gave me all these arguments about studies and stuff. And I don't care about studies. You can't drive an ought from an is and all this. David Hume, and they had no idea what I was talking about for the first part. And then now they got this Mother's Day thing, so now I got to write another effing email to complain about that and tell them how it's like, just like my wife's super destroyed about it. Like, she
Look,
just sees it.
I was homeschooled and I hated it growing up. But I'm considering homeschooling my kids.
Oh, I've considered it. I just don't have the money.
Yeah, well,
But
that's the problem. Is you can't. A lot of people can't afford it. But yeah, I am not. Like my dad works in the school system, and he tells me some stories about stuff that happens in there. It's like, eh, geez.
oh, it's gonna be a
Yeah.
revolution if I ever get in there
Well,
in
yeah.
Minecraft. You
In
know.
Minecraft, in Minecraft. Yeah. Well, you know what? I definitely have like I shill liberalism a lot, but doesn't mean it doesn't have flaws, and it doesn't mean that there aren't lunatics who have hijacked the system that need to be fucking kicked to the curb when it comes to certain areas. And when it comes to like trans stuff, I'm generally supportive of like trans rights. I'm a bit iffy when it comes to the kids stuff. I'm like, I don't know.
Well, I don't care
Um,
what adults do with their bodies. I think ultimately they're
but
making a
yeah,
mistake. But I mean, it's not my problem. But kids, I think
I,
that's just perverted.
I think the big issue is like first of all the technology isn't there yet. So the main reason like progressives push for kids to transition is like basically it's hard for trans people to pass if they've gone through like a puberty. It's really hard to undo those changes. So that's why they push for that. Um, because the technology for like surgery and body modification is not good enough to like convincingly make someone who's gone through a male puberty into like a woman.
Sure,
So they that
but
I know
yeah,
sorry, just let me.
yeah.
So that's like that's the justification for it. The problem is that what progressives don't admit is that there is a mixture. There are some people who are born trans biologically, and then there's some people who can be socially conditioned to do it. And I don't think we really understand the difference yet. So basically, what they're doing is they're like, well, they're just allowing it to happen. They're like, and there's people I'm sure you heard of like detransitioners and that kind of stuff, because they have like this ideological obsession. They won't admit that some trans people are like different than others, and that we really need to have like a solid 100% way of scanning someone's brain and be like, yep, they were born trans. And until we can like 100% scan someone's brain and be like, yeah, they're born trans, then I think doing this stuff with like kids is super fucking dangerous.
Well, not only that,
Um,
but look at and the way you said it, that is what they say is like if they don't do this stuff early, then they'll go through puberty and they won't be able to pass, right? But
yeah.
that's sexualizing the kid to such a degree at such a young age that it's kind of like really screwed up, like perverted. Like that is grooming in a sense, right?
Well, what happens is there's kids are very malleable. So I refuse to believe that you can't socially condition someone into thinking they're trans. Because like I don't know about you, when I was in high school, I was a fucking mess. I don't know who I was or what I was doing. Um, so yeah, especially kids these days, social media, super vulnerable. So yeah, I'm definitely gonna have to see a lot more shit before I'm gonna be convinced on like the trans kids thing.
Well, because I have three kids, and what I've noticed is that kids don't know what the fuck's going on because they don't have any experience. Like they don't
Yeah,
know, yeah, they're not capable of doing certain things because they don't know. And I'm not even saying like you probably remember in high school, uh, in BC, they're always like, oh, you have to know what you're gonna do when you're in grade 10, like start thinking of your career. Well, they
yeah.
said that to me. I was like, what the fuck? I don't know what the hell I want to do. I'm like 16 years old. So
Uh,
if I was 16, how am I supposed to? If I can't figure out what career I'm gonna do, how am I supposed to make the decision if I'm a man or a woman? And
well,
so what I say is, you don't make that decision. It's just you are a man or a woman. Like
yeah, so there's the fundamental problem of like you have to be like super socially accepting of trans people to make them feel welcome so they don't like harm themselves, which is fine. But the problem is, and that creates like an incentive for kids to become trans to get like acceptance and validation and that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
that's what I would say is like the sinister part, and that's what progressives are not willing to admit because it's become like a religion to them. They have their holy mantra, protect trans kids, trans women or women. They repeat it like a chant.
The
It's like a
anti-harm
holy.
principle.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff we have to work on there.
Well,
But
well that
I'm more concerned about like the whiteness stuff. That really gets my goat right now. So
the
that's
whiteness.
number one.
Oh yeah. I wrote a thing about that. The well, one thing I noticed that one of my family members went to a mental hospital, or have been in and out over decades or whatever. Every couple of years, they seem to have to go. Um, but what I noticed when I visit them is they get put into this hospital, right, a mental hospital that's full of
Yeah.
like super crazy people, like people on the phone with there's no wire on it. It's just like talking, have a total conversation, full conversation with like nobody. Um, so you put this person that's struggling into a environment that's just full of like the nuttiest things you've ever seen, and you expect them to get better. And it's like, no, what you have to do is you have to kind of reintroduce that person to reality by like visiting. So what I do is I just visit them all the time, like every day or two, at least. I was working full time, so it's hard to get up there, but I visit either every day or every other day, and just talk to them normally. And when they say crazy stuff like, "Oh man, they're all coming to get me" or whatever, I'd be like, "No, they're not coming to get you." But after a while, they come back to reality, you know. So
Yeah, well, the mental health system in pretty much, I haven't seen any country that really does it super well. Maybe the Nordic states, I don't know, they do a lot of things well. But yeah, I think there's things we definitely need to work on.
what I'm saying with that
Um,
is like if you feed the delusion,
oh yeah,
it's not
definitely,
gonna
definitely.
it's not gonna help,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So that's what I'm saying with trans people. Maybe feeding them the delusion
Well, I,
is
I I
not
feel
necessarily
I
good.
feel this is just again, there's no science based on this from what I know. But it feels to me like there should be a psychological solution rather than a biological one. Like it feels like it
Yeah.
would be easier to
No,
give them some sort of
the Nordic
drug
states do
that,
this.
yeah, fix the brain rather than like, because like I'll be honest, we do not have the technology to make people most people convincingly pass. Like it just we don't have the surgery to do it. It doesn't work out a lot of the time. That's why you have trans people who don't really pass well. It feels like the better solution, the simpler, less suffering, less expensive, is to give them some sort of medication that helps with the gender dysphoria, rather than change their entire body.
Yeah.
But well, that's a bridge we can cross when we get to. Anyway, I do have to. I think we have to
Yeah.
switch the
Let's get to
topic
Ukraine.
to
Yeah.
Ukraine. Okay, I'm gonna try and share my screen to you because I have like a map here that
Oh,
I'm gonna have to point out things on. So, uh, okay, okay,
okay.
can you see
Oh,
that?
this. Yeah, I can see it. I'm gonna full screen this. Okay.
Okay, I'm just gonna double check that it's working on my stream. I think it is. Oh no, hold on. I gotta switch some.
Add a window.
I gotta get. Oh boy, that's not good.
Oh, I can still hear you. So
Yeah, hold on. Okay, there we go. And okay.
it's pretty low res for me for some reason, but
Um,
I'll have to just deal with it.
yeah, that's I think I could only do 720p. I don't think I can do 1080p. It wouldn't
No,
let
no,
me.
it's fine. You're fine. For some reason, mine's on reduced quality because of network.
Okay, gotcha. Um, okay. Alrighty. So I think this is showing up fine.
I might need to put sunglasses on.
Oh, geez, yeah. Why is it so bright? I can't see. Hold on. There has to be something I can do to reduce the brightness on that because that is bright as fuck. Media source.
What if I can add this too? Oh, good. Okay, I can. Okay,
Um.
so you're on my stream. I have it recording on my stream now.
Okay. Okay, that's not good. Should have to edit some of this out of the stream. Um, yeah, shit. I don't know. It looks kind of shitty on my end, but I might just
Well,
edit it
if you
out.
zoom in, maybe it'll improve wherever you're zooming. Nope.
Jeez, that is. Yee. That is.
No dark
Why
mode
is
on
it
this one.
so? Why is it so fucking bright? Jesus Christ. Um,
Oh, there we go.
hold on.
That's much better, but not much.
Capture methods. Yeah, it didn't help. Okay, there we go. Okay. All right. I'm not sure if it looks good on your end, but it looks good on my end. So I'm just gonna go with that. Hopefully you can
Use your mouse
see what I'm
cursor
saying.
because I can definitely see your mouse cursor. So if you move it around to pinpoint things, it'll make it much easier.
Okay, cool.
So I
So
can't read
we're gonna
shit.
do a brief overview of the entire conflict. So we'll go with this different one first. Then we'll go into detail. So basically, start of the invasion, Russia invaded in like five main battle groups. They invaded up here, sort of to the west of Kiev. They invaded to the north, northeast, east, and from the south.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is the situation. You can sort of see there's this was April 1st, and then you can see the situation has changed. Like they've retreated completely from the north, and there's been some limited Ukrainian counterattacks.
So
Uh,
why did they retreat from the north and then I guess head to the east? What was the reasoning behind that?
so there is a problem Russia has basically due to their demographic collapse and some of their systemic problems. They cannot maintain a super big standing army. So they have currently there's this term called I believe tactical maneuver groups or something like that. But basically, it's the portions of your army that you can move around and are ready to go at any time.
Mm.
So the approximately 200,000 soldiers Russia has in Ukraine, or probably a little less than that now, but that's about 75% of their active maneuver forces. So they can't really commit more than that. Because they have to have at least like 25% to be in Russia in case NATO gets frisky. So they invaded Ukraine. They had, from what I think we can tell, bad intelligence. They sort of expected it to be a repeat of 2014, and they met a lot stiffer resistance than they thought. And so they realized that they weren't going to be able to meet all their objectives. So they had to take troops away from the north approach, and they had to redeploy them in the east. And they have seen some limited success with their new offensive, but um,
Is this what you call it? Are you the one that said this was the Medvedev option or something?
I don't think so. I think it might have been someone else.
Okay.
Anyway, yeah. So that's the general overview, and then there is the we can go over it. I have like a little write up for. Okay, so February 28th. I'm gonna go. So this is after Russia has invaded Ukraine, and so this is the initial advance. So they started February 24th, so this is 4 days into the invasion. They mainly made significant gains to the south here in Person. So you can see basically the existing territories Russia held are outlined in red.
Yeah.
So they made significant gains coming up near Kherson, which is right here from Crimea. So their group pushed up from the south there. They were unable to make any gains around the Donetsk and Luhansk, the DNR and LNR, so the contested regions, because
Yeah. Their Ukraine was ready for that area, right? Because they kind of
well, there's been fighting there for 14 or however many
eight
years, eight,
years.
8 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Ukrainian defensive lines there are very dug in, and the troops there are like veteran troops. So they had trouble there. Yeah. So then they also started their sort of northern approaches here, and if you look at the Russian lines, you can see they're very snaky. They were very much trying to do like a spear through a Kiev because they wanted to sort of decapitate the country by taking Kiev and the north here. Um, So yeah. Okay, so we're gonna jump
Well,
ahead
just
now
just a quick
to
question. You know
yeah.
the nuclear plant, right? The Pripyat.
Oh, Chernobyl.
Yeah, Chernobyl. They were apparently digging trenches there, and the soil is all
Yes.
effed up and full of radiation.
Yeah. I've not. Uh, there have been people talking about that. I have not gotten 100% verification of it. Apparently, it happened. Yeah, they dug trenches in like the Red Forest, defensive trenches, which was like super radioactive. Like the dirt had settled there, radioactive dirt, and they dug up the radioactive dirt, and then
Yeah.
they were in the trenches for like 2 weeks, and then yeah, apparently a whole bunch of them got sick. That's what people there said. Could be Ukrainian propaganda. It sounds like a good Russians being fucking dumb story.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's something that might have happened. I
Okay.
cannot.
Just curious.
Um,
I heard something about that on
yeah,
4chan. So
yeah. Oh, one other thing. So the map I'm using here is not 100% accurate. It gives a good general grasp of the situation. It is going to be slightly biased towards Ukraine just because it's based on like social media posts and stuff uploaded for like people in Ukraine.
yeah.
So it's not like this is not the Ukrainian official shit. This is like an independent sort of thing based on what people are posting on social media. And obviously, the Russians aren't going to be posting stuff on their cell phones very much. It'll all be going through like their state propaganda. So it is going to be biased in favor of Ukraine, but it's generally like all the little points you see on here, like there'll be stuff you can verify.
Yeah.
So it's
I've seen
generally
this map before. It's
yeah,
interesting.
it's generally accurate in aggregate. There's going to be some areas where it's not, but it provides a pretty good picture, and you can go back in time. So that's why I'm using it. Okay, so we were at February 28th, and now we're going to jump ahead to March, and we're going to go ahead 2 weeks to March 14th. Okay, so now we're seeing a lot of very intensive fighting in northern Ukraine, and we can see the Russian units are really trying to penetrate and surround Kyiv. But what they didn't anticipate is basically they have to follow the roads, their supply lines have to follow the roads, and Ukraine has these territorial defenses, their territorial defense units, which are basically militias, National Guard types, who they just gave a bunch of rocket launchers and stuff. So the typical thing in this period of the war was lots of unsupported Russian armor and vehicle columns getting ambushed by Ukrainian peasants with RPGs. So the Russians started having a lot of problems logistically in trying to take Kyiv up there. And then, as you can see, as we go down here, they have had better success in the south. They have started to move up. They have taken the town of Kherson already, so that's a significant win for them. They have gotten across the Dnieper River, which is a big sort of geographical defense point. So they did a pretty good job there. And then you can see they're starting to move up and surround Mariupol here. And they've also started to come down from Donetsk, and they've made a breakout of Donetsk in the south. So they're making progress here. And they've made progress in the north here as well. And they're doing the spearhead is going down to Izium. So Izium, another important town to keep in mind. They have, at this point, 2 weeks into the war, taken most of Izium. There's still some resistance there in the core of the city, but most of Izium is taken. So at this point, 2 weeks into the war, Russia is having trouble, especially in the north. But in the south and the east, they are still achieving their objectives.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so March 31st, 1 month into the invasion. So they're continuing to struggle in the north here around Kiev and Chernihiv here. They've tried the Russian tactic is they encircle cities, they siege them, they bombard them with artillery, and then they take them block by block. So you always see Russians try to encircle the city before they take it. That's what they're trying to do here, and they're just not able to do it logistically. I believe over here is where that big Russian caravan got stalled, like that highway that you heard of probably in the media.
Yeah.
That was those trucks up there, and the Ukrainians are doing a really good job of harassing them. So there's a lot of territory that the Russians have up here, but none of it is very secure. They basically just sort of tried to blitzkrieg, and it didn't work out well for them.
So what happened to their cauldron? The alleged cauldron tactic.
Well, you can see in the east here, that's what they're trying to do.
Hmm.
So you can see basically because the Ukrainian defensive lines are so good here, they can't really abandon this position. So the Russian tactic is they're going to try and encircle them. Um, but Ukraine is, I don't know how much credit I can give Ukraine, how much of it is like U.S. tactics and doctrine and NATO doctrine and like intelligence, because the West has been very heavily supporting Ukraine in that aspect. One of the main reasons they did so well in the beginning of the war, in terms of surviving like the initial Russian shock and awe strike, is that the CIA basically told Ukraine every single target that Russia was going to hit and where they had to move it and where the Russians were going to be coming. So Ukraine has been very well prepared for this by like Western intelligence services. So yeah, that's why if you hear Russia saying we're not fighting Ukraine, we're fighting NATO, kind of true. Um, so yeah, you'll see down here the biggest change is that Russia has completely consolidated their gains in the south of the country. They've completely taken Kherson, and they're trying to push up here, but they are meeting a lot of stiff resistance, and they're actually not going to get any further than this ever. And same here, like these lines you see here, except with the exception of in like the south here, this line of defense for Ukraine actually holds from now on. So they Russia actually stops making significant gains about a month into the war. They don't get much better than this. Like this is about as good as it gets for Russia. So yeah, they've consolidated their gains in the south. They've linked up with Donetsk, and then they're going to try and close the cauldron here, but they're not going to be able to. Um, Let me look at my notes. Mariupol under siege now, completely surrounded. At this point, some of the city was still resisting. At this point, it's just Azovstal, like the steel mill, because
Yep.
it's literally like a fucking nuclear bunker. So I don't even know if it's Russia's fault they can't take it. Like it was built to withstand a nuclear attack. It's going to be hard to get people out of there. You have to use a gas attack pretty much, and they can't do that because that'll piss off the West. Okay, more than the West is already pissed off.
I think
All
they're
right,
gonna use the gas.
they might, but the thing is, they don't really need Azovstal. They can just sort of let them starve in there. It's a good tactic, to be honest. What they're doing there, Russia does some smart stuff occasionally. Okay, so April 14th, 2 weeks into April. So we're moving in 2 week increments right now. So hold on, we are. Okay, no, sorry, I went to March 14th, April 14th. So this is also the day that we got confirmation that the Moskva was sunk, which was sort of a big morale victory for Ukraine. Debatable whether it's like a big military loss for Russia because it wasn't doing much. But again, sinking Russia's flagship, big deal. So that was a big win for Ukraine, and the biggest change you'll see is at this point, the retreat from the north has been completely affected. So Russia has completely left the north. They've retreated, and they're in the process of routing their troops through Belarus and to the east of Ukraine. And you can see here, so I mentioned Izium before. They have now completely taken Izium, and the plan is they want to take Izium and they want to ride it all the way around and complete the encirclement. So they want to take Slavyansk. That is like a very important city for Russia to take in order to complete the encirclement. And so
Mm.
you'll see they want to take Slavyansk, and then they also want to take Barvinkove because that is one of the main supply routes into Slavyansk. So you're going to see them trying to push out to here and there, and that's how they're going to meet their objectives here. Um,
Just a side
and
note, I heard that there's some units in Belarus right now, and so it's Ukraine has been holding back some of its forces in the west because of this. Is that the case? Do you know of?
well, yeah, Ukraine does have those will probably be territorial defense forces. And the situation with Belarus is, I believe, because there's significant civil conflict in Belarus. They don't necessarily like being Russian stooges, all the population. So what I heard is that the general, or the president, who's a big Putin stooge, basically, he's
Is that
put in power by
Lukashenko or
him.
something?
Lukashenko, yeah, that's the guy. So he ordered his general to invade Ukraine, and the general refused and said, basically, if you give that order, the general refused. He resigned, and he said, if you gave that order, you're going to have like a civil war on your hands. Because the military simply will refuse to do it because they generally have like good relations with Ukraine. They have like cultural, social connections. One, they don't want to fight them. So that's what I've heard. I don't think Belarus is going to get in the war anytime soon. And if they do, they're kind of a joke, to be honest. So I don't see them doing much. The only thing I could say, yeah, maybe they're tying up some troops, but again, that's probably Ukrainian territorial defense forces, which are like people who are defending their own home cities and stuff. They don't really get transferred to other places. So yeah, same thing with like Transnistria. That's like a Russian-controlled break-off state in the south there. But like
Moldova.
again, well, yeah, they're a break-off state from Moldova. It's called Transnistria.
Yeah, I heard about them
Um,
a couple years ago.
yeah,
Eh,
basically it's like it's Russia's MO is what they do is they go and they cause civil unrest in a country and then they like, oh, they want
well,
independence and then they settle their military there and
well,
then they
I
basically
think with Transnistria, it was a mostly Russian area during the Soviet Union, but it was part of the Moldovan SSR. So when the USSR collapsed, they didn't want to join Moldova because they were actually Russian. I think that
well,
was
they didn't want to join, and then the Russians encouraged them to stay independent over a period of time. Like Russia has military
yeah, they have
stationed
a
there.
thousand troops there. I think
Yeah, it's not a lot, but
they're
it's
peacekeepers. They say.
peacekeepers. Yeah. Okay, so yeah, Russia has retreated from the north here. Their current objectives at this point, they want to push south into Slaviansk. They want to take Barvinkove, breaking a vital supply line. Basically, if they could take Barvinkove, Slaviansk can't be defended because they can't supply it. So they're going to cut off the supply to that if they can. And if they take Slaviansk, then basically the cauldron begins to close at that point.
This reminds me of how the mid-century Germans dealt with the what's that? The big French defensive wall. Is that the
Oh,
big?
they just went around it.
They just went
Yeah,
around it through Belgium. Kind of reminds me of that.
yeah. Well, yeah, and so as you can see, like the Russians have been, they have like a few breakouts here. They have like a little section of ground here, a little section of ground here, but mostly, this Ukrainian defensive line has held. So that is 14th of April. Yeah, but generally the Russian advance has stalled, and so that's why they're reconsolidating their BTGs, their battalion tactical groups, and they're moving them down to start in the east again, focusing again on Izium, Slaviansk, and Barvikove. Okay, so now we're going to jump again another 2 weeks to April 30th, and not much has changed.
Mm.
Um, Not much at all. So at this point, the Russian offensive has officially sort of stalled. You can see they're doing a lot of bombing. Down here in Kherson, like I said, they tried getting further up here. They crossed the Dnieper River, but they haven't been able to push it much farther out. And if their stated objective is correct, they want to make a corridor to Transnistria and connect with them. They're going to have to take Mykolaiv and they're going to have to take Odessa. And they just right now they have not pushed up to Mykolaiv yet, and they have not yet. They're still stuck around this. Again, these lines don't really change from this point on.
I've heard that in Odessa they have some sort of like landing ships that they just haven't used because they're worried about hitting mines or something.
Okay, if Russia tries to use their landing ships in Odessa, it's going to be a fucking massacre. Odessa has prepared very well for that eventuality. They would all get killed on the beach. They wouldn't get anywhere. It would be fun to watch. I hope they do it, but they're not going to be effective. And I assume that Russia probably won't land the troops unless they've pretty much already taken the city. Yeah, probably not going to happen.
And how's
But yeah,
I know that Romania is supporting them near Odessa, like they're sending stuff over the border there. I'd wonder if like the Russians would take that southern area, just like south of Odessa, like southwest. Um,
um,
but I guess they won't.
well, the problem is Ukraine probably has coastal defenses set up all along there.
Yeah.
And then what they have done is I believe they tried and failed, I think, to take out the bridge between Romania and Odessa to stop the supplies coming in. For whatever reason, they weren't able to destroy it. They damaged it, but it wasn't destroyed. So yeah, they tried to do that, didn't seem to work. But yeah, so basically the map you're looking at now is the map it is today, with the exception of some small advances up here near Izium. We're at 30th of April, which is actually
It's a week
really
ago.
close to today.
Yeah.
Yeah, but basically the only advances Russia has made in about 2 weeks is some very small advances around Slovyansk. So they haven't been able to take Barvinkove. They haven't been able to cut that supply line. This has been stagnant for a while now. They haven't gone any further. Stiff Ukrainian resistance has kept them there. And they're trying to form like a little mini encirclement here, but they took the town of Zarinche, and I believe there was also yeah, they took the town of Lyman. Ukraine retreated and blew a bridge over here. So they're
Hmm.
making slow progress. They were making slow progress. The last 2 days, they haven't made any progress at all, and they didn't even try to do any advances today. They just sat back and shelled. Um, so yeah, this is the map as it stands, and basically their offensive is stalled everywhere. And there have been Ukrainian. The Russians are actually in the defensive around Kherson and around Kharkiv. You'll see all these little blue flags. That means Ukraine has recaptured stuff. So Ukraine has been seeing the most success near Kharkiv. It's limited success. They're just recapturing small towns and villages. They're not going to be pushing up into Moscow anytime soon. But it is important to note that Russia is on the defensive in these areas. Even if they're holding them, it means that the momentum has shifted to Ukraine because Ukraine is now counterattacking in these areas, and Russia is still attacking in the middle and the east here with very little success.
What are these blue symbols that are sort of like a steering wheel or something to me? Yeah, these are all over the place. Does that?
Those are just sirens. Those are like
Oh,
aerial
okay.
alerts. It's just informing people in that area that there are like air raid sirens going off. Because this entire time, Russia is like sending cruise missiles
Yeah.
all over the place. The interesting thing is that Russia doesn't really have air superiority. They have some limited air superiority on the front line in some places because the Ukrainians don't have good air defenses. But one of the reasons they've had a big problem is they don't have air superiority over the rest of Ukraine. So their air force is limited to like sending standout like cruise missiles off from like out of range of the Ukrainian AA systems. It's not the ghost of Kiev. It's just that
Yeah,
Ukraine
yeah.
has a lot of anti-air systems. And Russia, unfortunately, has invested in a lot of very flashy equipment, and they didn't invest in like seed capabilities, which is suppression of enemy air defense. That's something the U.S. has heavily invested in. It's basically specialized fighters that go out and bait out like the enemy anti-air to using their radar, and then they launch anti-radiation missiles which lock onto the radar and will destroy the missiles or the anti-air equipment.
Hmm. Interesting.
Um, because Russia didn't invest heavily in that, they have very limited capabilities, and so they have been unable to destroy Ukrainian anti-air defense, which means they are unable to 2 months into the war have air superiority. You look at Iraq, the U.S. had the first thing they did was got air superiority, and then everything else came from that. So I would say that is like almost the biggest failure of the Russian military is their incapability to get air superiority. Because if they had free reign to fly over Ukraine, they could bomb every single Western convoy of equipment coming in. They could bomb whatever they want, but they can't. So that's causing them a lot of problems.
So, what do you think the odds are of, like, say, Ukraine pushing north? Say, if they push north, say, between no, not I guess to Russia, right? Maybe not towards, maybe towards Moscow, but not all the way. What are the odds? Do you think they'll try to do something like that to
Um,
get some sort
I,
of to get put them back on their heels?
I don't think there's a good chance that maybe after they've like pushed Russia out of their territory entirely. Seems very unlikely, especially since Ukraine is basically being fed tactical and strategic advice by NATO, and NATO doesn't want like escalation with Russia. What Ukraine has been doing is they've been very cheeky about like sending helicopters and drones over the border and striking. You can see one right here.
Yeah, oil.
Oil depots. So they've been hitting a number of oil depots. I hit one in Bryansk a while ago. Ammo depots, production facilities, that kind of anything in range. They've been hitting with like cruise missiles, low cover, like low altitude helicopter raids, drone strikes. And so far, Russian air defense has been kind of dismal because they didn't stop the helicopters from infiltrating their territory. They didn't stop like two Bayraktar drones from getting in there. So Russian AA has not been great. Russian technology in general has been kind of showing itself to be a bit of fucking garbage, to be honest.
Yeah, I went to
Um,
Russia in 2005. Have a couple. I went to Moscow and St. Petersburg.
yeah,
I have a bunch of Russian friends. They seem to be mostly against the conflict. They're they're mostly just against war in general. They don't really
yeah.
say the certain things because they don't want to get in trouble. Um, but yeah, it's interesting seeing from their point of view. So they haven't posted a lot on Instagram since it started.
Well, no, I mean the Russians. You get arrested for speaking out against the war, just flat out. You can't speak out against it at all. You can't even like hold a sign in protest. You get arrested right away. So yeah, Russian state media has cracked down a lot.
It's a totally different culture. It's not like here at all.
It's very different. Yeah, they were starting to liberalize, but then they decided to go the other way, and not going very well for them in my opinion. But like as a general tactical analysis of the moment and like a projection of the future, I can tell you a bit more. So like I said, they've deployed about 75% of their active maneuver forces. So that means that they're having a really hard time replacing their losses. And just by nature of being on the offensive for so long, Russia will have taken probably significantly more losses than Ukraine. Generally, the ratio when it comes to attacker slash defender, generally
Three to
through
one.
history, yeah, 3 to 1.
Yeah.
So the estimates I've heard have been floating around about 20,000 Russian dead. That sounds about right. It could be a bit lower, it could be a bit higher. But basically, they've lost at this point probably about through death and injury, they've probably lost almost about 40% of their original invasion force of like 190,000, and they're going to have a really hard time replacing them, which is why their offensive is stalled, because they just simply don't have, if they had the troops to do it, they could. So yeah, they've deployed 75% of their active maneuver forces. They're having a lot of trouble replacing them, which is why a lot of people are worried about general mobilization, which would basically mean that they're transitioning to like war economy and they start conscripting people. Because as of yet, they have tried to avoid sending conscripts in. It's mostly been their like professional military.
And
Um,
what do you think for Donetsk and Luhansk? Do you think that they're going to, like, let's say in the end, do you think they're going to end up being independent, or do you think?
the thing is that Russia is not, they talk a big game about being for those people, but you have to remember, so they incited the civil unrest that created those regions, and they funded but to be honest, their military has been in the region. The Russian military has been fighting Ukraine since 2014. So they have been keeping the civil war in there ongoing, and that's why it hasn't really gone anywhere because Ukraine has been fighting Russia in the Donbass for the last 8 years or whatever. So yeah, they've kept that conflict ongoing. They've funded the separatists and whatnot, so they've made sure that the war doesn't end. And they have also been conscripting people from those regions because they're not really Russia, from what I've heard, and more or less poorly equipping them and using them as cannon fodder. So, and then the plan is they basically will replace them with ethnic Russians later on, real ethnic Russians. So I'm not sure how much of the population of that area is going to be left by the end of the war because they're basically being thrown into the meat grinder.
Well, I heard a lot of
Um,
them have already moved across to the Russian side of the border.
yeah, that's definitely what I would have done. And if I was Russia and I had been like concerned about the well being of those people, I would have just evacuated them all.
Yeah.
Um, because it's not like Russia needs people, right? They're in demographic collapse. So okay, yeah. So we don't know the exact number of their losses, but again, can't be good, especially based on the visual confirmed evidence of their vehicles. They've lost about 600 confirmed tanks, which is quite a bit, especially since Russia doesn't have a lot of tank. They can't make high tech tanks in great numbers. So they have like the T-14, which is their super tank. They made like four of them prototypes, and this is like a pretty consistent thing in Russian military. They will make a airplane or a tank or a military vehicle that looks really cool to show off on their parade, and then they can only afford to make four of them. So yeah, Russia has not been able to use their most modern equipment because they don't have any significant numbers of it, unfortunately. So we don't know the extent of Ukrainian losses. They're probably pretty high, just because there's been a hardware disadvantage so far. Russia has way more tanks, artillery, that kind of stuff. Um, but they can't be that bad because I know for a fact from talking to my brother that morale is good, and Russia hasn't made any big breakthroughs. So if the Ukrainians were collapsing, Russia would have made breakthroughs, which they haven't.
So your brother's
Um,
fighting over there, or
I can't talk too much about what he's doing.
okay?
He has not fought yet. He is in the next week due to be deployed, I believe. He's been training and getting into the right area. It is like still, it's like a logistical nightmare on both sides. Like Ukraine is obviously having a little bit of trouble.
I heard people weren't getting paid or something at some point.
Well, it's like it is volunteer. It's mostly volunteers. It depends. Like there's a number of different ways. So there is the initial the Reddit battalion, the volunteers, where they just took basically anyone and then they paid them like shit. But then most of those got, I think most of those got like fucking hit by a cruise missile, and then like the survivors, because there was like the early phase of the war where it was a bunch of like idiots who'd never been in a war who just wanted to go and like fight against like Sauron or something.
Yeah.
Dumbledore's army, and then they got hit by Russian cruise missiles, and they're like, "Oh shit, we're not the Americans in this conflict. We're like the fucking Taliban. We're getting nuked from the air."
They're posting like pictures, right? Like on
Yeah,
Reddit.
no, the that was an embarrassment. My brother's a professional soldier. He's with professional military. He's embedded in the Ukrainian military. He's not part of like the Foreign Legion. He's directly involved in that, and that seems to be the direction that they're headed. Is like having certain integrated foreign battalions where they take like veteran fighters and then they put them in like a Ukrainian special ops squad.
Hmm.
So yeah, I don't even know where he is or really where he's going because it's safer that way.
Yeah,
But
no, for sure.
yeah,
That's OPSEC or whatever.
yeah, like the last thing I want to do is like fucking get him killed. So yeah,
Shoot some area where he isn't, then say he's there.
he is not anywhere in Ukraine. He's in Moscow right now.
Yeah,
Um,
right in the Kremlin.
you're right in the Kremlin. He's assassinating Putin as we
Well,
speak.
I've actually been in the presidential palace there. They
Oh,
were
really? How's it?
we weren't supposed to be there, but like one of the students we were with, their
Oh yeah.
dad was work security. So I've actually walked around those hallways. You know the wide Putin meme. I've actually walked down that hallway, and
Oh,
it was
wow.
I probably one of the I don't know. There's probably only a handful of Canadians that have ever done it. So, but
Well,
it was pretty
what I
crazy.
will say about Russia is their fucking architecture is beautiful. Very.
If you ever get the chance to go to Moscow or St. Petersburg, check them out.
I will go after Russia has been liberated. um, okay, where was I? Oh yeah, so Ukraine has done an excellent job in defense, but their ability to counterattack has been limited because again, they don't have a hardware advantage. Like they don't have a good air force. They have an air force, not a lot.
What are they flying? I
They
know
don't.
the Russians are flying like Su-72s or something.
They mostly have MiGs, I believe. MiG 31s. I don't know. I'm not familiar super with like the Russian Air Force or the Ukrainian. I know they have like Su-25s for ground attack. They have some MiGs, but generally the Ukrainian Air Force is pretty small, and they've had some limited success. But again, Russia has a way more. So yeah, they have been having a hard time doing counterattacks because they don't have the hardware. They have tanks, but they have been hesitant to use them, which is pretty smart. But we will probably see that change in about the next month. And there are a couple of reasons why. So like I said, not looking good for Russia. If they had the manpower or the hardware to make a breakthrough, they would have done it by now. They haven't been able to. And based on their current stated objectives to link up to Transnistria, that's just not going to happen. It's impossible. The Russians don't have enough forces in the area.
How long can
Um,
the Luhansk, Donetsk line on the Ukrainian side, like how long do you think they can hold out for if they're getting
uh,
consistently shelled?
well, I mean, the thing is, it's devolved to trench warfare, and Russian artillery simply isn't really accurate enough to take them out. Russia's going to run out of shells before they like we saw in World War One. They would launch like literally 2 million shells, and then the troops would be fine. So just
Yeah.
the nature of trenches is they're very good at protecting infantry from artillery, and Russia can't really use their air force, and they've been unable to use like their artillery is really outdated, like everything else in their army. The new U.S. and like French artillery pieces that are getting shipped into Ukraine right now. The Russians do have some pieces that can go out to about 40 kilometers. Most of them are older and they go out to about 30. Accuracy is not good. The new ones going in there, depending on the shell that they use, they range from either like 45 to 80 kilometers in range, and
Mm.
they can shoot a guided shell, which is like it's called the Excalibur, 80 kilometers, and it's guided. So as soon as those get to the front and start being used, um, Russia's going to be in trouble because they rely heavily on their artillery. And Ukraine has been very good at their use of artillery so far, in combination with like civilian drones and all this other sort of stuff. Because again, Ukraine for the last 8 years has been trained using like NATO tactics and doctrine. So logistically and sort of like structurally, they're much more efficient than the Russians, who are still sort of struggling out of that Cold War communist system, which is really fucking shit. Uh, Other big things to note: the 2 weeks into May, the first wave of mobilized reservists from Ukraine will complete their training and can be deployed. So that means that Ukraine is about to get a massive boost in manpower here. And all those guys will be decked out with the latest NATO weapons and equipment. The switchblade drones, they'll be having, everyone will have a fucking RPG. They'll have the armored vehicles, the artillery. So that in about 2 weeks is probably 2 to 3 weeks is when we will see Ukraine begin the counteroffensive in force. So currently, we're going to see probably a stalemate for the next 2 3 weeks until Ukraine's first wave of reservists arrives, and then they're going to start pushing back against Russia in force. And then we will see whether Ukraine can pull off a counteroffensive.
It's
Um,
do you have a Telegram?
I do not.
I found this Telegram called Intel Slava Z.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So I'm curious. I just keep an eye. I like to keep an eye on everything, see like which propaganda comes out true. This one
Yeah.
seems to be kind of shit, but they have a lot of footage of like captured NATO missile launchers and stuff, and
Yeah, well, that is true to an extent. So obviously, by nature of Russia being on the advancing side, they will occasionally capture Ukrainian stuff. The issue with that is Russia naturally being deceptive little bastards. Frequently, what they will do is they will take basically the way these javelins work is they come in tubes. They come with the launcher and the rocket together,
yeah,
shipped
yeah,
most times. So a lot of times, what the Ukrainians will do is they'll literally fire the rocket and they'll leave the tube. So a lot of those pictures you'll see are probably just the tubes. If you look carefully, you can notice there's no rocket inside. So again, like Ukraine has the infinite money cheat. They don't really care about the tubes. They'll just abandon them so they can run away faster after hitting a tank. And then there obviously have been some cases where javelins have been captured. But the thing is, like, this is 80s tech. This is not advanced tech. So Russia is not going to be able to like reverse engineer anything from it. And yeah, so it's great, I guess, that they can capture them. But the other thing they do is if you see a lot of it, there's been quite a few cases where they've been caught like reusing the same weapons captured over and over again. There was a case where they shot down a Bayraktar drone and then they put it in two different locations and claimed it was different drones. Like Russia does a lot of sneaky stuff like that.
yeah.
So don't believe everything you see from Russian state
Oh,
media.
I don't. I try to keep an eye on both sides because like I got the Ghost of Kiev and the fucking
Yeah, well,
couple other
obviously
stuff I got.
Ukrainian the Snake Island thing.
Oh yeah, Snake Island. Yeah, that was pretty stupid too. But but I haven't seen much since of that from that side. So maybe it's
Yeah,
just
well, the
early
Ukrainians have
jitters.
generally been more reliable, but the thing is, like, there's also I find like the UK and US like intelligence analysis on it usually a lot more accurate. And I don't think they've been caught making any lies
The
as of yet.
the Buka thing I think might be. I'm just not sure yet, but I have a
So
suspicion on it.
Well, the thing with the Buka thing is I have looked into it. So there was drone footage taken of a Russian BTR firing on a cyclist, which ended up you can look at the body that was killed in that drone video, and you can look at it and you can tell it's one of the bodies found in the street. So at least that is proof that there was some civilians being killed. We don't know if it was deliberate, accidental, but there's at least one confirmed to be killed by Russia. And then there is the satellite photos, which date all the bodies. They start appearing while Russia was still in control, and they appear over a period of several weeks. Now, obviously, it's possible that the satellite photos could be faked, or they could have just swapped the dates around. But my suspicion is that you can probably tell just based on like the weather and the angle of the sun and what you could probably tell whether these satellite photos are legit, and you could probably go and verify through like, was this satellite over this position at this day? Does the angle it was taken up? My suspicion is that if there was any hard debunk capable using that, like saying, they took this at the wrong date and they switched it around, then it would have come out already, which it hasn't.
Well, I haven't heard much since. But one thing I was curious was that all the dead bodies, they had a lot of these the Russian rations, empty ration boxes. I don't know what's true. Obviously, I guess you don't either to some degree.
Yeah.
I it's either that the Russians killed a bunch of civilians, right? That's
Yeah.
one theory, and then the other one would be that the Ukrainians were getting vengeance against people that accepted Russian aid or whatever.
Yeah, no, those are the two prevailing theories. The issue is just there's been no evidence of the Russian side other than like there's the rations, but that could be explained of like the Russians just left them around there, they were eating them there or whatever.
Well, the only thing about the ration boxes thing with the dead bodies is like it kind of lends credence to the idea that it was like vengeance because they would have seen whoever had the white rag
Yeah.
on their arm or whatever, and whoever had those rations would have been seen as like
Yeah.
traitors. But I don't
My
know
so
if it's true.
this is my suspicion. And I've like it's definitely not beyond the Russians to kill civilians, just in terms of like what we've seen proof of, and also stuff you get just from intercepting like their radio communications, where they'll openly talk about it. Um, but my suspicion of what happened was the Russians were in that region. They were trying to advance the fight in Kiev, and what was happening was there was probably significant civilian resistance. And then what probably happened was they went on the system. They're like, okay, if you're pro-Russia, we'll hand out these little white things so you can be in public, and then we won't shoot you. And then there was probably some Ukrainian civilians who used that, took advantage of it to report on Russian positions and whatnot, and basically be subversive while pretending to be pro-Russia. And the Russians probably caught on to that, and then basically did like retaliations and reprisals and
Well,
executed the people.
that's interesting because if that's true, then that would be like executing spies, essentially, which is what most militaries do.
Sort of. It's,
That wouldn't
it, not really.
that technically wouldn't be a war crime at that point. I mean, it's still shit, but
It's a bit iffy. Like there's another story that came out recently. There was like a Ukrainian grandma that was constantly reporting Russian positions to like Ukrainian artillery, and then they found out and they fucking smoked her whole house. So it's like, I mean, yeah, she was a spy, but she's also a fucking grandma. I don't know. Maybe
no,
chill a little bit.
well, it's a war, man. But I mean, I'm not saying it's right, but I think
Yeah.
that wouldn't be a war crime technically speaking if they could say they're spying,
I don't know if
take a risk.
It's a gray area for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's most of anything. Okay, there's a few more things I have written down here. Say Russia's lost the momentum to advance. Ukraine, notably, has been consistently able to target Russian leadership with like precision rocket and artillery strikes. Recently, the Russian chief of staff of the army was very nearly killed in a Ukrainian rocket strike on like a command post. And so there's no confirmation of this, but I'm like 99% sure the CIA is like has their fist shoved up Russia's ass and is basically drip feeding the Ukrainians intel on like command posts and stuff. So a significant, and I think the main reason why the advances have stalled completely, like the Russians haven't even tried attacking the last 2 days, is because their command post in the region of Izium got taken out by artillery. So um, yeah, like they lost a bunch of their commanding officers. The chief of staff escaped, but again, Russia has been losing generals at an incredible rate that can really only be explained by like Western intelligence telling Ukraine where they are, and
Yeah.
then Ukraine being able to hit them. So that is like that alone is like, yeah. How do you? Because Russian encryption isn't good. So if they send orders via radio and stuff, usually gets intercepted. And so then if they send generals to the front to command directly, then they all get killed. So Russia's just not having a great time, to be honest. And then again, like I said, they're also receiving Ukraine Western strategic and tactical advice. Russia has their education system is shipped. The West has like really, really good military academies and stuff. So the brightest minds in the West are masterminding this defense, and so far they're doing a good job. And as I said before, Russia lost the momentum. We're about to see that shift in about 2 to 3 weeks as the Ukrainian reservists get mobilized and sent in there. We are about to enter a new phase of the war. Russia is going to find themselves on the defensive, outnumbered. They're going to be more Ukrainian soldiers than Russians, and unable to replenish their battered troops, who are already going to be demoralized. And depending on the unit, some of them will have taken about 50% casualties, 25% casualties. So morale is not good. They've taken heavy equipment losses. So they're
Would
not in.
would would you think Russia would use a tactical nuke?
That is the danger. Hold on, I'll just get into this. I get to that at a point. So combined with the Western intel and heavy weaponry, I'm confident Ukraine will see like limited success at the very least in the coming offensive.
Okay.
So Russia will be forced to either negotiate at that point because they are unable to reinforce their troops immediately, um, and they are unable to really stop the Ukrainian advance. So they will have to either negotiate and be like, okay, chill, we're going to hold on to everything we have, and then we'll stop attacking you. Ukraine probably won't take that at that point, but they might try to do that. Russia might try to negotiate, or they might declare a general mobilization. At which point, in my opinion, a war with NATO becomes inevitable. Because if they do general mobilization, it means Putin has decided that Russia, this war is like integral to the security of Russia. Like if Russia doesn't win this war, they're going to die. And so then Russia will transition to a war economy. It won't solve their problems in the short term, and it won't solve a lot of their problems, but it'll mean they can get a whole lot more manpower there in about, I don't know, 6 months, a year. But I don't know if that's going to be like, that's like a future thing. But basically, what would happen then, nobody can know. But it means that Russia has shown the intent that they're going to fight to the death over this. And then at that point, they would probably end up using tactical nukes if they aren't winning with their general mobilization. At which point, NATO would intervene, and then we're in a hot war with Russia, which nobody wants. So that's the
Do you
possibility.
think NATO would actually intervene like in a hot war?
They would, if Russia started using nukes, because the fact is, if Russia is this desperate, then basically what it means, more or less, I've listened to a lot of people talk about this. Russia's objectives are probably, based on what we've seen, they want Ukraine, and it's not like an economic thing or whatever. It's based on common geographic invasion points for Ukraine or for Russia historically. So they need, let's see, they need Finland, they need Romania, they need parts of Poland, and they need Ukraine and Moldova. And those are like the main land invasion points that someone can invade Russia from. And so basically, if Russia does a general mobilization, more or less it means they've decided, okay, they think they're in threat of being like invaded by NATO, and so they need to take and hold these territories to protect themselves, and then they will just keep throwing people at it until they take those territories. And obviously Finland and Poland and Romania are NATO countries. So yeah, it feels like if Russia does a general mobilization, they've decided that they're going to war with the world, basically. Um, so yeah, let's just hope they don't do a general mobilization. Um, and like I said, even with general mobilization, things don't look good for Russia in terms of military. meat grinder tactics don't work anymore. I'm sorry, it's not the 1940s. And the other thing is that Russia is committing demographic suicide by wasting so many of their young men when they're already seeing demographic collapse. So I don't think they can really afford to throw people into the meat grinder. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, some scenarios that are unlikely right now are a full Russian retreat or use of tactical nuclear weapons. So we'll probably either see a negotiation, a general mobilization. That those are the two main options. And then unlikely are Russia just decides to get the fuck out or use tactical nuclear weapons.
If they used tactical nukes, do you think they would hit like Kiev and Lvov or whatever?
Um, Depends on how stupid they are. Because if they like just straight up nuke cities as like a fear tactic, NATO would definitely respond with something to hit Russia. Like at that point, they might even do like a preemptive nuclear strike. I don't know, because that's like a pretty hard line that you can't cross. But what I suspect they would do is they would probably use it on like particularly hard Ukrainian defensive positions, just to like blow the fuck out of it, so they can advance. Um,
Because I know
yeah.
they have nukes that don't have any radiation apparently.
Well,
It's just a big ass
most
bomb.
most most nukes don't have radiation these days. Fallout lasts about 2 weeks, and it's if you have a gas mask on, you're probably fine. Um, so yeah, the whole like Fallout thing ruining the world is a bit exaggerated. Unless you're like specifically making a dirty bomb to like salt the earth,
Yeah.
radiation is irrelevant in about 2 weeks.
Hmm.
Yeah, because the reason why it was like really bad in Hiroshima and Nagasaki is they had like really shitty nukes back then that didn't use like the full yield. And then it also depends on if you like do an air burst or if you detonate on the ground. There's a bunch of factors that go into it. But our current nukes are much cleaner, so fallout is not going to be a major concern. But if the nukes hit, stay inside for 2 weeks, basically. Is there anything else? Yeah, so unless there's a major change, we're seeing the collapse of Russia as a world power. There's not really any win scenarios for them. They can't they can't advance right now. They don't have enough men. Um, if they commit more men with a general mobilization, they're going to run into the meat grinder because they'll be poorly trained, poorly equipped, and they won't have solved any of their systemic issues. And again, NATO will just keep escalating the support. So there's not a win condition for Russia right now. The best they can hope is like to destroy the West in nuclear hellfire, and nobody wins in that. So yeah, it's all sorts of fucked right now, but that's the situation generally.
Oh, very interesting. That was a very nice presentation.
Thank you. Yeah, I've sort of been obsessed about this since it happened. So
That's good. It's nice to have a nice detail. Obviously you have a bias and whatnot, but I mean, like
well, yeah.
it's fine. I get it. Um,
Well, I do try and find like independent sources. I'm not just getting this from CNN and
no, I
whatnot.
know. I think
Obviously, yeah,
what you said was everything you basically said was I consider trustworthy for the most
yeah.
part. Yeah. There's obviously stuff we don't know.
Well, the
But
main thing is like we don't know like the Russian losses or the Ukrainian losses because neither side will admit that because it's bad for morale.
fog of war, right?
Well, yeah, honestly, we probably don't even know. They probably don't even know how many troops they've lost on both sides.
But if you want to
But
see something like totally biased, check out the Intel Slava Z
I
on.
I've seen lots of stuff they put out. Trust me,
Oh,
they're a
yeah,
bit of
okay,
a meme.
okay,
They're pretty funny.
they're brutal.
But my favorite thing was like the maps that the Russians were putting out initially, and then they took over like half of Ukraine in the Russian maps, and they're like, oh my god, we have all of Ukraine, and then
Then tell them they have nothing.
well yeah, and then basically the map didn't change while they continually claimed great victories and advances, and then eventually they had to like sort of scale the map back.
Yeah.
And then the other funny stuff is like Russia claiming they've destroyed like 200% of Ukraine's tank inventory and like 300% of their drones and 400% of their air force, and they
Never
keep
ending
destroying
money
more.
cheat.
So yeah, it's just they keep blowing up more of them. So yeah, well, I think that's about it. Yeah, that's all I have really. I think it was a good conversation. I didn't end up yelling at you like I did with AA. So I'm improving. I can do better.
Well, I think
The
it was pretty, like the thing is I wasn't going in as I'm not coming into this as like to have a conflict. Um,
Yeah.
I was asking questions and bringing up points, but um, I just don't see the
Well,
point.
this is constructive dialogue, which is what I would ideal like. But I also do enjoy the screaming matches, so I can get a bit of a hand sometimes. But I'm glad that we managed to keep it civil, which was my intention going into the conversation with AA, but that did not work out.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard. He's not too he even admits to himself he's not very good at the debate thing. He's more in the
Hmm.
discussion. So if it gets to the debate, then I think things start to break down. But
Yeah. Well, I mean, I started it by like shit posting and calling him like a pro genocide person on Twitter. So I don't think that I don't think that conversation was ever destined for good
so that's
things.
how you got on the live stream. There you go.
Oh
That's
yeah, well I spent the whole day calling him like a fucking pro genocide piece of shit.
well, there
Yeah,
you go.
that's
That's the ticket. Uh,
fun stuff. But anyway, yeah, appreciate the conversation. Would love to do it again sometime about something. You seem like a pretty reasonable, chill person on the dissident right. Fairly intelligent. We had a good conversation. So yeah, if you want to do this again sometime, hit me up and we can figure out something else to talk about.
Same to you, man. I hope to maybe we can figure something out, something else we can talk about, and have another stream.
Okay, sounds good, buddy. I'll let you go. Have a good night and stay safe.
You too. Have